Is there such a thing as writer's block?
Well, what does it take to be super creative over the course of a career, over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years?
4 specific nootropics that you can use to improve your creativity.
20% of scientists and researchers take prescription drugs in order to increase their performance in some way.
It's very hard to be an artist and to survive over any reasonable period of time.
Creativity now is as important in education as literacy.
I think that writing
At first step is not about filling these perfect quotes. It's about filling your
We're going to cure writers.
The Writer's Block Podcast.
All right, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year and all that jazz. We made it. Welcome to 2019 and another episode of the Writer's Block Podcast. Okay, my aim this year was to put out at least one episode each month, and here we are at the start of Feb, and I failed that already. What are you going to do? Anyway, I have recorded 2 already this year, so I'll get the next one out before the end of the month to make up for it, hopefully. This episode is with my new friend, and I'm totally going to screw up the pronunciation. I can't even say that word. The pronunciation of his name, Jayszun Vanderwerff. Fingers crossed I got that right. And that's probably why most people call him Jay, for simplicity's sake. Australian born to a Dutch immigrant family, he is a luthier residing in Lara, which is just outside of Geelong here in Victoria. For those that don't know what a luthier is, it's someone who builds guitars. Jay probably first came onto my radar after discovering his Instagram profile last year. And being a guitarist myself, I quickly became a fan of his work. He was nice enough to put together a rad-looking guitar, and even better sounding, for me to use on a run of shows that I'm doing currently with Melbourne band Area 7. And it's been a dream to play. You can find clips of the Teletron on his Instagram or my personal one. I want to keep this as short as possible, as we covered an incredible amount in the 3 hours we were together. He's got an incredible story, which I know you're going to love and appreciate. Everything from growing up in a rough area of New Zealand, failing every subject at school and being thrown in and out of detention centres. After finding his way as a guitar tech and session guitarist, he's toured and worked with some of the world's biggest rock and pop acts, including, U2, Bon Jovi, ACDC, Blink-182, Hilary Duff, Avril Lavigne, and more. Then there was the high-level security work, serving as personal security to nearly every rapper you can imagine, Mos Def, Phaeroh Monch, and even people like Henry Rollins. This conversation was chock full of highlights and some extremely low points as well. I found it incredibly inspiring. Not only is Jay an amazing luthier, gaining the respect and appreciation from some of the world's elite, but he's also an entrepreneur. He's like a wealth of knowledge and just an incredible human being. If you're a guitarist, a fan of music, or any type of creative artist, you're going to pull a lot of value from this episode. The only place you can reach out to Jay is on his Instagram, which is at Temple Guitars. That's TempleGuitars. He's very active on there, posting great videos and pictures of his builds. Definitely worth checking out. And as per usual, links to other things we cover in the episode will be found on the show notes, which is at thewritersblock.co. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Jayszun Vanderwerff. Jay, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
This is one that I've been looking forward to for a very long time.
Sweet man.
Well, quite a few months anyway. Now, firstly, Jay is short for...
Jayszun.
Jayszun.
Yeah, my name's Jayszun Vanderwerff.
What a crazy name.
Yeah, I don't expect anyone to engage or remember how to say that.
And what nationality is that? Like, where does that come from?
I was born here in Australia, but born to a Dutch immigrant family, so everybody had all of these very, very Dutch names. Yeah. And so they came here before I was born via Indonesia. And then we all lived in a big house together, 3 generations of us in the one house, and spoke Dutch at home, and kind of slowly assimilated into Australia.
Right.
So here I am with the crazy name, and Jay is easier for everyone, I think.
Yeah. And you still got family here?
Yeah, I've got people sort of all around. But when I was 7, my mum and I moved to New Zealand with her new husband, and so my link with Australia got broken quite early, and I didn't come back until I was 31 or something. So Australia, I don't really fit in here. I'm not a typical
Aussie.
Ocker. Yeah.
Typical Aussie.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, the reason we are here is because you make some pretty phenomenal guitars.
It's true.
And that was what sort of drew me first to you. Was I think I saw something on Instagram, because you're pretty heavy on the social media, in a good way.
Yeah.
It's what attracted me, and I saw these, not only these finished guitars, but the process of making them, which is something that, like, even myself as a guitarist haven't been exposed to a lot. And I found it quite interesting. So I really wanted to, and I was watching you put together this awesome workshop, which is just outside here in your garage.
Yep.
And it's something that I really wanted to come down and check out.
Yeah.
Which I had the pleasure of doing last month.
Yeah. Before your first leg of that tour with Area 7.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. I want to know sort of how that all came about. But firstly, I sort of want to go back and find out how you got into all this stuff. So, let's talk about where you sort of grew up and how you first got into music.
Okay, cool. So, like I said, I moved to New Zealand, to NZ, when I was about 7. And my mum introduced me to music. She used to be a radio DJ in the 70s.
Awesome.
So she had this big stack of old 45s. They weren't old then, but of old 45s. And that was kind of like my musical education. And at some point in my life, I think I was about 12 or 13, she had an old guitar in the cupboard, and she pulled it out and showed me how to play a couple of songs. And I was already really into the idea. So she gave me that guitar, and that was kind of where I started out. Before I was making guitars, for the longest time, my love affair with the instrument was based around playing it. And that's how, I made my living most of the time. And so started playing guitar around 13, which is when Eddie Van Halen recorded Beat It with Michael Jackson. So it was a very good kind of fortuitous time to get into guitar music. And also, like all of my best memories from early childhood were based around guitar music and guitar memories. Like back in the day, we had these things called transistor radios, which were like the size of kind of like a service station piece of banana cake or something. And you'd load up, batteries in there, and I used to tape it to my bicycle handlebars and just ride around and listen to Jefferson Starship and Queen and Zeppelin and like all of these incredible bands that are still incredible, still considered to be so pivotal in so many people's lives. And so I just remember sort of cruising around as a kid in the 70s, listening to this just incredible music coming through the radio on my bike. So that was kind of like how I fell in love with it. And I've got to say that the bands and the music that really got to me then, that really, that I took on board and really cared about, I still care about now to the same extent. So I think I was very lucky being a guitar kind of guy, growing up in that piece of history. Because growing up now, while there's so many different types of sort of guitar music out there, and it hasn't died at all, but it's very fractured and it's just a different thing. Whereas everywhere you used to look, it was just guitars all day. Yeah. So I'll always be very grateful for that for that experience.
Yeah, awesome. And first bands, like when did you start actually, like, jamming with mates? And
that's interesting. So as a
or
kid,
if you did, I just presumed. I just presumed you.
Yeah, no,
you were in a band, but
I had a kind of really unusual trajectory as a musician, or kind of everything that I ended up doing in a very kind of circuitous way. So when I was a kid, I lived in New Zealand, and where we were, it was a very kind of rough place and a rough time.
Yep.
Some of those towns now are kind of like family towns, and it's all good. But back then it was pretty dark, And,
right.
And I was having a really hard time sort of at home. So I ended up kind of falling in with the bad kids, and I was very young, like I say, 7 or 8, but I was not acting in a manner befitting a young gentleman, and so I got locked up a lot. I spent most of my childhood in and out of youth detention and things like that, and because I was the youngest and also the smallest and probably the whitest kid in there, it was a bit of a rough time, and so because of that, my education was next to non-existent. I failed everything at school and at high school and all of that. So when I left high school at maybe 16, I went straight into working, and the work was very non-skilled and very demanding. And so for a year or two after that, my whole world was just going to the job and kind of trying to be there on time and cope with it and everything. And as a result, I didn't go to my first show until I was like 18, something like that. I had next to no social life. I just go home and crash and practice finger tapping in my bedroom, and so there was no social component. So I missed out on that experience of getting together with with friends and having jams and that kind of, I think that really informs a lot of people's musical education, and it definitely helps you to connect with other musicians. If you're just used to playing by yourself, it's obviously you're missing out on an opportunity to plug into that kind of collective consciousness that musicians share, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I figure it will with you.
Yeah.
So I didn't do any jamming or anything. Sort of any kind of guitar playing I did in public came along much later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So fast forward to sort of 18, 19, school's finished. Where did you go from there? Like, did you have any some early jobs? And
well, that first job that I did when I left high school, I was working in a cheese factory.
Right.
And we'd make cheese by hand.
Okay.
Handmade cheeses. And we had all of these crazy kind of customers like King Juan Carlos, who was the previous monarch of Spain, all of this kind of stuff. So it was very good cheese. And I eventually got fired, and the boss called me up into his office, and he said, "Jay, listen, you've got what's the word when you when there's things that you should just know as a matter of course, and you don't know them." So I was no good. I was no good to these people, and so he fired me. And when he fired me, I was devastated, because that's your job, and that's all I'd ever known. But the plus side of it was that I ended up getting a fair whack of holiday pay, which I didn't know was a thing. And I had this pocket full of holiday pay and initiative. I said I liked initiative, and I was like, "How the fuck are you meant to have initiative about cheese? Can I swear on this podcast?"
Of course.
Fuck yeah. So I was devastated, and I had all this money in my pocket, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and see Metallica on May 1st, 1989 at the Logan Campbell Centre in Auckland for their Damaged Justice tour. And so for the first time, I lived in the North Island of New Zealand, north of the capital city called Wellington. I lived in a place called Paraparaumu. And Paraparaumu is an interesting place. in a lot of ways. Historically, like, you get into sport a bit. So, you know, everybody knows who the All Blacks are and everything. The chief who basically was the guy that, you know, started Paraparaumu off, his name was Te Rauparaha. And he was this incredible figure in New Zealand, you know, overcame overwhelming odds and all of this kind of stuff. But he was the guy that actually wrote the Haka Kamate, which is the one that the All Blacks perform and all of that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting. I had a lot of kind of Maori culture, Maori tikanga and te reo, the language. I had a lot of exposure to that when I was in detention with all the Maori kids, because it's kind of like how they set them straight, give them some pride in their culture, and it gave me a whole lot of pride in their culture as well. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And so I was in the cheese factory. I got my holiday pay. Went down to Wellington, which is an hour south of Paraparaumu, and I went into this music store back when music stores are, you know, like music record store, not a musical instrument store. Back when everything was vinyl, and they had CDs because CDs were new back then, and definitely cassettes. But yeah, it was all about the vinyl. And I walked in, and there was this dude with long hair behind the counter, and I thought, oh, this is all right. You know, this isn't what I was expecting. And I bought a Slayer t-shirt so that I could wear it at the Metallica show. And the guy that sold it to me was John from Shehad. And we got talking because we both liked the same t-shirt. And so, you know, I'd walked in there, bought a t-shirt, and 5 minutes later he'd offered me a job for when Metallica was over. So, you know, I was very upset about losing my cheese factory gig, and suddenly I was going to be working in a record store. So that was very nice of him. Yeah, it was a really cool kind of like, again, just a fortuitous situation that I fell into. Yeah. So this is you know, quite a cool story. I think I went up to Auckland to see Metallica, and obviously it blew my world apart. But what happened was, I was moshing at the front for like the first hour or so, and then I got super hot to the point where it was just dangerous. And I thought, I got to go to the bathrooms and get some water in and on me. So I did that, and as I came back in, I kind of looked at the crowd, and of course, you know, this was the first time Metallica had ever played in New Zealand, and so everybody was going off, and it was a very intense mosh. And I just thought, I don't really want to get back into that right now. You know, I feel a bit like I've done my dash. And I looked down the wall of the venue, the left-hand wall, and the PA didn't go all the way to the wall. There was a gap. And I thought, I wonder what's in there. So, super skinny dude, and I slipped down through the gap. And there was a pallet up against the side of the stage. And I used it as a ladder because the stage was quite tall, was quite like head height or something. So I came up the pallet, and suddenly my head was in Guitar World. So there's it was Andy, the guitar tech for Metallica at that time, and he's working away on, you know, one of James's guitars, and I could see the band on stage from the side of stage, and I was just like, this is insane, this is so cool. But at the same time, I had this impending sense of danger, like, I'm so fucked. Yep. If anybody catches me, you know what I mean? It was Andy Bataille, and who was the tech. Anyway, James is playing away, and he snapped an A string, and he came stomping around into Guitar World, which for the uninitiated is where guitar techs set up and they have all of their gear. And in Andy's case, he would trigger effects and do all kinds of things like that. So a lot of the time when you go see an artist that you like, sometimes signal processing is taken care of by automation, and sometimes it's taken care of by a human, and it's not often taken care of by an artist, even then. Even back in those days.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's only something that I was exposed to when we were touring a lot with bigger bands, and I saw that for the first time. I'm like, that's crazy. Here I am, like, fucking around, like, with all my
tap dancing,
lanky feet tap dancing on stage, and I don't need to be. I can have someone do that for me.
North Lane, they've got an insane amount of signal processing, and, you know, the incredible band and incredible technical stuff. So
Yeah.
for yourself and for the listeners, if you've got a spare, like 3/4 of an hour and you want to get your mind blown, go on YouTube and search out their sort of behind the scenes gig rundown.
Yeah, right.
I don't even know if it's real. Like, I don't know if they kind of just made it up and made it sound convincing, because it's just so overly convoluted. I just can't get my head around it. But anyway, so there's James Hetfield walking straight towards me, looks me in the eye, and I thought, I am dead, because he was in full "And Justice for All," And he sees me, rips the string off his guitar, throws his guitar at Andy, walks up to me, gives me the string, and I'm like, fuck yeah, like, this is insane, this is amazing. And then he turned around and he went up to a big bucket where they had all of his green Metallica Tortex picks that he used to use, and he scooped up a big handful of them, and then he came back and gave me all of those. And it was like, I think he knew I wasn't meant to be there. I was a grommet, so wide-eyed and just like, what? But yeah, he just kind of scanned me and went, hell yeah, this is cool, let's give this guy something to remember.
How good's that?
It was so good. So that was kind of like my first initiation into behind the curtain of what happens, and it blew my mind. And afterwards I went out into the car park and I kept one of the picks and the string, and I sold all the other picks for like $10 each in the car park.
Brilliant.
So that was pretty good. Anyway, then I went back to that vinyl record store, and I worked there for about a year, and there was an instrument store next door. And I'd go and hang out there on my lunch breaks, and I'd play metal and annoy them all, like that scene in Wayne's World where it's like No Stairway, and I'd always be playing, Metallica and Slayer stuff and what have you. So they hated me. And then one day they were shooting one of New Zealand's kind of major music shows. It's always funny saying that, like, one of New Zealand's major music shows. Like, it's the most popular pie stand in Vanuatu. Like, it's an island, it's islands. But nevertheless, that's what happened, and it was my world, so it seemed quite big at the time. There was this dude, very cool dude. He was like the Andrew G, the Osher Ginsberg of New Zealand. His name was Robbie Rakete, and he was playing some slap bass. And I was in there when they came in playing, jamming out. And he said to me, would you maybe accompany me? I'll play something, you play along on the guitar for this segment. And it was going to be on this national TV show. And I was like, I was, freaking out. I did it. And doing it was a very, very good idea, because one of the producers of the show produced a lot of other content on New Zealand terrestrial TV back before Netflix and all of that. And he said, hey, listen, I need somebody to record incidental music for shows I do. Would you be interested? And I was like, I would absolutely be interested. But the thing is, and this happened again and again in my life, where people will say, can you do this for me? And I go, of course. And they'll go, great, and go away. And then I'll think, how am I going to pull this off, Yeah. And it's like what we were talking about before with your plans for the writer's block and its physical location and all the services, the very varied services that it's meant to provide. Right now you've got no idea how you're going to pull it off, right?
Correct.
But we both know it's happening.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, So, yeah, it was a situation like that where suddenly I was going to be doing music for, New Zealand TV, and I had no idea how to do it. But I pulled it off, and it was fine. So if you're listening and you were in New Zealand in the late 80s, early 90s, you've definitely heard me swanging away in the past. So yeah, that was kind of like... it was amazing money, but it wasn't a regular paycheck.
Right.
And at that time, pre-internet days, I started playing in a pop band. I got headhunted to be in this pop band called The Spirals, and we were signed to BMG. So nowadays, like, BMG isn't even a record company anymore, but back in the day, it was one of the major labels. Before, I think it probably got like absorbed into Universal or something like that. And so we recorded this big budget single with the guy who was the producer of the year for X amount of years and the best studio and all this kind of stuff. We went into massive amounts of debt to record this single that never went anywhere. Like, that's rock and roll, right? So as bad as that was, it was also a really great education because, you know, when we all start out, we're all naive and wide-eyed and optimistic. We think, oh, wow, you know, a record label. And it's the worst thing sometimes. Yeah. It can be the worst thing. So after that, I left that band after about a year because I was just too into metal. And and I ran into this guy. I'd met him a few times. He owned a PA hire company. So they'd hire out PA rigs, provide tech support, do live mixing, and he had a recording studio across the street as well. And I asked him, do you have any jobs? And he said, no. He already had a bunch of staff. But I felt really strongly that place would be a really great foot in the door in the industry for me, like the mailroom, that mailroom stereotype. So he was like really highly integrated within the music industry, you know, within the scene over there. So I thought about what I was going to do, and I quit my job. And I went on the dole, and I turned up on his doorstep, and I said, listen, I'll work for you for free for a year, because, you know, I was funded by the government. If you give me every bit of knowledge and experience that you've got, give me access to the people that I need to meet, take me everywhere, I want to be your personal assistant. And that time he said yes.
That's awesome.
So it was brutal. He used me like a little bitch.
I can imagine.
But the upside was he had that recording studio, so I got him to teach me how to use it, and then I would go in just by myself and record guitar, bass, drums, and whatever for the TV shows that I was doing. And, you know, so they were just like things like comedy shows and what have you. So it was good because sometimes you'd have to literally play country and western because that's what they want. Yeah. And sometimes they want death metal or whatever, which was clearly the best times. So yeah, I did that. I lugged his PA systems up like 20 billion flights of stairs and went to 1 million lunches and got to see how it all works. You know what I'm saying. Sort of half of rock and roll or music is who you know, and the other half is being in the right place at the right time, I think. Absolutely. So so yeah, I formed a lot of relationships, and that was cool. And I know this is something that you wanted to ask me about, so I'll tell you. One day I was in this place, it was called Sound Co, and I was just doing some cleaning, and the phone rang, and so I picked up the phone, and it was this gentleman called Dennis Sheehan, who's no longer with us, but he was the road manager for U2. Right. From way in the early days till, you know, later on. And they were doing their Lovetown tour with B.B. King at the time. And Dennis said he needed someone to retube and rebias 2 Vox AC30s and 2 Fender Twins. So obviously, and so 2 of them were Edges amps and 2 of them were BBs. And I said, I'm sorry, you know, Mr. Sheehan, all of the techs are out on jobs right now. There's no one here to do it. And he threatened me with physical violence unless I turned up at the stadium immediately and did the work. Really? And I liked his style, so I did it. Awesome. Yeah. And so I arrived at the venue and I went up on the stage, and Metallica was one thing because it was like, I'd say the kind of the best correlation would be like festival hall kind of thing, just a big room. That was what Metallica was doing. And U2 were in a sports stadium. Yep. And so when you come up the ramp, you know this feeling. When you come up the ramp and you look across the stage and you just see an ocean of seating and standing room, and it's just like, wow. Yeah. You know, it's mind-blowing. Nothing can prepare you for that. The scale of like a legit stadium show. And of course, being U2, it was bigger than anything that ever came before. They had 2 PA systems. So if one PA system went down for even a fraction of a second, the second PA system, which was behind it, would kick in, and it was amped and EQ'd to play right through the PA system in front of it with no discernible loss of sound quality. Wow. So that's kind of like U2 are really serious about their live shows, even then. And the other thing that really struck me about that gig was on the wall of Guitar World, they had all these full-size synthesizers. So back then, modular synths weren't a thing yet. They didn't really exist. And so U2 would have... They had a lot of like keyboard intros and things like that. And so they'd have the keyboards that they needed to get those sounds mounted on a rack on the wall, and they'd also have a backup for every single one of them. And all of it was wired together with this archaic kind of collection of MIDI cables that, you know, now we look back at it and just think, well, you know, what's that? USB didn't exist, nothing like that. But back then it was like the cat's pajamas. So I walked in and I thought I was seeing, like, you know, the wiring of God, if you will. So that was really amazing, because it's just not something that, as a punter, you really think about. You don't think, where are those keyboards coming from?
Not at
just
all.
rocking out, you know. And the Edge, being the Edge, bought 50 guitars on the road with him.
Seriously.
And he always does. So it was just, his poor tech was just buried under this mountain of work. So very long story short, their tech, whose name is Dallas Shue, he had a viral flu, and he just needed help, because, you know, when you're shivering and sweating all at once, you know, it's not the best time to be doing like a major show. So I came in, rebiased the amps, got them all going, and I rolled them back on stage, and I asked Dallas where he wanted them. And he handed me that iconic 1976 Carina Wood Explorer of the Edges that he's had from the beginning. He sold it now. He sold it for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Really?
Because he owned it, right?
Yeah.
But he handed me that, and he just said, test them out. And I thought, all right, you know, I'll do it. So I plugged them in, and I started playing the intro to Where the Streets Have No Name, because it's like the only U2 riff that I know, and it's cool, and, you know, it's fun to play. And it was coming out of the monitors really, really loud, and that kind of caught me by surprise. And also because I was trying to listen to the amps, so I had my head down next to the amps, and, you know, just made sure everything was working as it should. And then when I finished, the delay chain eventually finished, and I heard this huge cheer from outside the gates of the venue. And all the stupid morons out there thought that the band were sound checking.
Brilliant.
So I was like, I felt I was flushed with power, you know, but really it was just, I was an imposter. But that was very cool.
Amazing.
So technically that was my first tech job.
Yep.
And once word got around about that, after that, the phone just kept ringing for about a decade. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How good's that?
Yeah, that was, like I say, just fortuitous. Landed in it, right place, right time. And you know, if I didn't know how to get an amp going, I wouldn't be sitting here with you now. You know, I'd be cleaning toilets somewhere or something like that. So, but I mean, it wasn't all like, this is the thing. You know, there are people who, they have one of those moments and suddenly there's no turning back and they're off. Like, you probably, do you know MJ Travers?
Yeah.
So from back in the MySpace days and things. And, you know, she got that job as PA for Pink. And, you know, after doing probably merch and everything for everybody in Australia, and she worked her way up. She paid her dues, and she got that job, and now she's always going to be fine for the rest of her life. She's good, you know. And that wasn't what it was like for me. So I did that, and I was doing tech jobs, and I'll sort of go into more detail about that if you like. But at the same time, it wasn't regular. Nothing was regular. And New Zealand's a tiny place.
Yeah.
So it gets lots of big tours and lots of music. You know, how many sort of amazing bands or artists do you know that are from New Zealand? There's a lot, you know. But I needed to make money. So I just went into, I was a bouncer. And that's funny because, you know, I'm a pretty sensitive kind of cat. And I've changed a lot over the years. But back then, I was in my, let's say, my New Zealand mindset. And that was a bit kind of confusing because when I got to Australia, like, Australians are really cheeky and they'll say things they don't necessarily mean. Whereas in New Zealand, we have this thing called mana.
Right.
And you don't do that. You know, you don't say something unless you're ready to punch on or what have you. So I came over here and I was, you know, eventually years later I came over here, I was tremendously confused because people would say, oh, nice tats, dickhead, and then there'd be a fight and they'd be going, I don't understand what's going on. And friends would say to me, you got to calm down, like, you can't do this. The guy didn't do anything wrong. And I was like, do anything wrong? He questioned, you know. It's just ridiculous. So that's what I did. I was being a bouncer, and I worked around about the same time. Peter Jackson started doing international movies in New Zealand, and New Zealand, like that Wellywood phenomenon started to sort of happen. And so as a result, I was doing the door at this place that was set up specifically for A-listers only, tremendously wanky, and but also awesome because just about nobody wanted to, you know, cause a ruckus. So it was a nice chill sort of job, and I definitely was happy about that for a change. But through that place, I ended up looking after Elijah Wood and Liv Tyler for a little while, which is, again, another thing that when you're just some small town dude in New Zealand, that's not something you'd ever think was going to be sort of in your future.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of like a mix between dead-end bouncer stuff or bodyguard stuff before all of the regulations kind of came in, or teching, and a lot of bands that had no right to want a tech really needed to have a tech. You know, it was kind of like a status symbol,
right?
I guess. And so I got a lot of work through that, but I also just fell in love with it, and I loved being on the road and the family kind of vibe that comes up. And you know, also getting heartbroken by when we all break up at the end of tour, and you know, I love it that you know that you can identify
exactly what
with
you're
this,
talking about,
because you've played so many hundreds of shows and with all of these people. But yeah, so I got to the point with teching where I'd kind of go, "Hey man, who's looking after you on this tour I hear you're doing?" And people would be like, "Oh, we can't afford anybody. We don't have anybody." And so I'd just go on tour with them and fund it myself, just because I love doing it.
Yep.
And after a while of that, I was just everywhere all the time. And that was kind of funny. There wasn't a lot of international stuff happening at first, but it did eventually start to happen. And it'd be hilarious because say I'd walk in, I'd see you at Rod Laver Arena. I'd be like, "G'day, Hez. What's going on? You feeling good?" And it's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Okay, got to rack off now." And it's like, "Okay, cool." And then you go to the next place, which might be Hong Kong, Singapore or something, and you're sitting out the back, you know, just warming up, getting ready to go on, and then I'll walk in and I'll just be like, "Hey, have you got that $5 you owe me?" Like, it's just suddenly you're just everywhere. It was really trippy kind of. I loved it. I loved traveling, and I loved all of that kind of stuff. So because of the profile and contacts I made through U2, I got on tours with Metallica, Bon Jovi, Blink-182, Hillary Duff, Britney Spears, Avril Lavigne, Akadaka, like everybody that was on the road at that time. Clearly I couldn't do everybody, but I kind of made my choices. And Hillary Duff was an interesting one because, you know, I'm doing a lot of guitar bands, and then it's like a little Disney pop princess. But again, great experience and lovely people, which I think, you know, you will know that when you meet celebrities, it's quite disarming until you get used to it, that they're usually the nicest people in the world and the most genuine people in the world. And you could go to a party in Fitzroy and sit in the corner and everybody just ignore you. But when you're around celebrities, they just want to be your best friend and they mean it. And I don't know, it's just something about them that they're just super cool people generally most of the time. So I did that. I toured with Metallica twice on 2 different tours, and it was so cool remembering back in '89 when I was peering between the road cases, and then years later I was like napping in them. You know, I'll probably, like, I don't need the work anymore, so I can be honest about the things that went on. But when, especially with Metallica, when the band were playing, I'd go into their dressing room and I'd eat all of their food.
Brilliant.
And like, just to put it in perspective, like, people out there might think, "Oh, that's a bit rude," you know, they're playing and they want to come in and they want to eat that, whatever. But they'd order from 15 or 20 different menus, 5 or 10 different dishes from each place. And so you'd walk in and just be like a tsunami of food. And these guys, especially Kirk, he eats like a bird. So just kind of walk in and pick at this and, you know, grab a bit of that. And so when they go on stage, you could hit it as hard as you wanted and no one would ever notice. So yeah, got really fat on that. Not really, but, you know.
Put on a few kilos.
Yeah, definitely put on 35 kilos or so on each Metallica tour. But yeah, it just blew me away, like, just that perspective of if they wanted a live giraffe delivered in there that afternoon, they'd just have it. Yeah. Because their level of power and influence and money was just astronomical. So after a while, my main bread and butter while I was still in New Zealand, because clearly we're in Australia now, this isn't brought to you live from Aotearoa. My main bread and butter was a New Zealand fronted, female fronted rock pop band called Fur Patrol. And they've sort of evaporated now as far as Australia is concerned. When they got here, the word from the record companies was, we've already got a Super Jesus, which is insulting because they were different, and there's room for all kinds of stuff, right? But they're on the radio like everywhere in the late 90s there, winning all the big awards and constantly rotating, highly uncommercial radio. And they also did a lot of TV shows, so that gave me a peek behind that curtain and get an insight into how all of that works, because it's a whole other world. And that served me sort of really well later on in life when I started doing TV appearances and things like that. So I did a couple of years with them, and I eventually reached a point where I just kind of fulfilled all of my Fur Patrol related dreams and decided to go my own way. And it wasn't that I had anything against them or that I hated them, because it wasn't like that at all. And to be honest, I was really super grateful to have been a part of their ascension and to experience so many firsts with them. Like, you're a band guy, so when you would get the news that you're supporting Bullet for My Valentine the second time or what have you, it's like, yeah, this is awesome, this is happening to me. But the people, your sound engineer or your crew, they got to experience it all with you and would be very, very happy for you and all of that. And so it's a beautiful kind of feeling, and it deepens the feeling of family. So I haven't talked to those guys in like 18 years or something.
Right.
And I might never speak to them again for the rest of my life, but I'll always love them, always be super grateful. So yeah, that's rock and roll. And that's kind of how I filled my time. That's how I met your mum in New Zealand.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it none of it was kind of like world-changing, all-consumingly big and, super successful or anything, but it all gave me kind of a set of tools that when I came here and started and also overseas, sort of internationally more regularly, it gave me the tools that I needed to not freak out and just do what needed to be done in whatever role I was performing at the time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if I just had fallen straight into like, one of the things where, like New Zealand was kind of typified by, even though I was in that band and we were signed and, there was all of that and it was exciting for a while, most of my life was as a supporting role, and I wasn't sort of in the spotlight myself. And then once I got to Australia, I started kind of being in the spotlight more myself, and all of that kind of like, all of those shit jobs kind of prepared me for when I landed over here and started doing bigger things. So yeah.
Very cool. So you had a business of your own.
Yeah.
Where does that sort of slot in? This is pre-Temple.
Yeah, it was a complete accident. The business was called Mix Lab, which is just kind of like such an unimaginative generic name. But what happened was I was hanging out with and living with a bunch of drum and bass DJs at the time, which gives you an idea of the time period.
Yep.
And I noticed that they were too broke to afford gear of their own. Some of them clearly had it, but most of them didn't, because they had to spend like literally every cent that they had on records and drugs, but mostly records.
This was back in New Zealand, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was still in New Zealand. So that, they clearly had to do a lot of drugs for research purposes and things like that. It was important. So, and I was just thinking, we've got rehearsal rooms for bands and for theatre people and stuff. Why don't DJs have rehearsal rooms? And once I thought of it, it just seemed like the most obvious thing.
What bedrooms are for?
Well, it wasn't like here in Melbourne, we've got Revolver and the Bakehouse and these institutions. And if you're a DJ and you're motivated, you could just go and hire a room there and, or you could go to wherever and hire your DJ gear and, it's possible if you want.
Yeah.
But there just wasn't anything like that in New Zealand at that time, or nothing that I knew about. So, I just thought, why not put something together for these guys, kind of like a necessity is the mother of invention type dealio. And at the time, I was in another band that had quite a bit of buzz around it. The buzz never eventuated out into anything, but it seemed like every day it was like, oh my God, you know, this influential person or that person said this, or we're going to fly you to New York next week. And, you know, like nothing ever kind of happened. You're nodding, you know what I'm saying. Yeah. It's just the usual music industry BS. But it could have been something, but it couldn't. But the upside to it was, the band's irrelevant, like, you know, but the upside to it was that we had a manager, and he was another guy that was like highly integrated into Music Planet. And he was, you know how all of the kind of like the most successful managers in music that you meet, they're just kind of like a little bit sleazy. They're very much a boys club, you know, they're just men, you know, and
exactly
they like beer and you know, all that kind of stuff. So he was kind of like that. He was just super social and had all these contacts and experience. And I said to him, here's my idea, I need a mentor. And I thought maybe he could put me in touch with someone. He said, sure, I'll do it. And I thought, well, that was easy,
very easy, you
know, thanks very much. So what he said was, I'll work for you just like I do with the band. If we sell something, if we make something, I get a percentage of the profits, and the percentage is going to be 30%, which was more than a standard management fee. And this was before 360 deals and all that kind of stuff came out. So, but he said he laid down his terms, and I accepted them because I was a moron that didn't know anything, and he knew everything. And so, the next day he called me into his office and he said, okay, so here's what we got. We've got sponsorship for all the turntables, the mixers, the computers, all of the peripherals. He even got like sofas in from furniture companies. Like everything was sponsored, every single thing. So I didn't have to spend 1 cent. And he'd found a commercial premises that used to be an internet company, and they'd left, but I can't remember what you call it, but kind of like the interior design of businesses, like their fit out, it was just perfect for what we wanted. So again, didn't have to do anything. And he got the first month of rent free because he said to the real estate people, hey, listen, we're going to have to fit this thing out. So we didn't do shit. So we were just in there and operating, and the thing kind of grew wings and took off by itself. So it was just really lucky. Yeah. And I mean, I guess I kind of knew, New Zealand being the tiny place that it was, I kind of knew everybody that could possibly want to use it. But the best thing about it was that that was the Wellington location, and then these guys kind of would go on tour or hang out with their friends in other cities, and then demand popped up for more sort of, not franchises, but more locations. Yep. So we opened up 2 more locations of that. And, you know, literally all I had to do was plug everything in and hire a receptionist who was there to kind of like go in and clean up in between sessions, make sure everything was still there. Like, you know, the DJs didn't nick off with the carts and things. And so, it just took on a life of its own. And after a while of that, not very long actually, just a few months, the manager, Alan, said, hey, listen, here's what's happening. You can continue working, doing this thing and get X amount of money over this much time, or we can sell everything tomorrow as an ongoing concern, like sell the business, and you're going to make Y money. And Y money is infinitely bigger than X money, and you don't have to do anything anymore. So I just said, sell it. Yeah. You know, and so he sold it, and we made out like bandits, and it wasn't quite like Bitcoin money or anything. But we did really well out of it, and I don't know how we did so well because Wellington only had 120,000 people in it, which is a regional town kind of deal. But I guess at that time DJing was just super hot, and everybody wanted to be in the Chemical Brothers and stuff like that. So there was a lot of heat surrounding it. So cashed out, and I moved to Melbourne.
Right. And is that the beginning of Temple?
No.
No?
Nothing's ever simple.
No.
So, again, I'm sure you can relate really well, but I met a bunch of Aussie bands when I was doing the Big Day Out tours back in like the very early 2000s. And I made some pretty amazing friendships that just happened instantly.
Yep.
And suddenly we were just all up in each other's lives and very cool, you know, just really, really cool. And once that tour was over, I just thought it would make good sense to go to where the scene was. New Zealand is really, and always has been, really hot for music, but the kind of music that was doing really well is starting to emerge. It was like Fat Freddy's Drop and, you know, which is awesome, but it's also, I don't happen to be in that band and they don't need my services kind of thing. Whereas by contrast, here in Melbourne, you had, you know, eventually, you know, you had Jet, and you just had so many bands that were playing guitar, and it was a huge peak of guitar music to the point where Melbourne had a scene that kind of people would talk about internationally, you know, like people talk about the Seattle scene or the LA hair metal scene, and there was this Melbourne rock and roll scene, and so I thought it just makes sense, right? And at the same time, New Zealand was really great to me, and I'd kind of forged a lot of relationships, and I had it very easy there. Kind of my entire life was subsidized, and I didn't really have to pay for anything, and it was cool in retrospect. But I was a very big fish in a very small pond, and I wanted to know what it'd be like to be a very small fish in a big pond. So I wanted to break out of my comfort zone, which is a thing that you, I know, talk about through your Insta posts and things like that with the writer's block. So I moved to Australia pretty much overnight, had these new friends, had this new kind of mental attitude, and I had enough of New Zealand in certain ways. It's always going to be precious and everything, but, you know, like you'd tour overseas and you'd come home and the place was just empty. Yeah. It was just very weird. And at the time I lived in this huge warehouse that was full of carnival floats, with all these people who were actors and musicians, and I was the only person in the place that wasn't a celebrity. And as fun as that might sound, to be surrounded by all these people with all this juju, you know, I just wanted to sort of go live by myself and not know anyone and start again. And so, yeah, I kind of had a, if you will, a personal revolution, and just thought Melbourne seems to be, you know, the place where that should happen. The irony was that once I came to Melbourne, I lived in North Melbourne, and once I got my place there, over the next few years, half of New Zealand came through it anyway, so I may as well have just stayed where I was. But I came to Melbourne 2001, and I think it was 2001, and on my first day here I worked for Bon Jovi at Etihad. But the thing was, I wasn't a tech, I was just doing local crew, and so we were lugging like road cases and steel lighting trusses until 8 o'clock the next morning. Yeah. And it was just, to put it in perspective, like there's a big Samoan guy that was working alongside, and we were both carrying the same stuff and everything. And by about 6 or 7, you know, I could see he was either sweating from his eyes or he was crying. And I said, "Bro, are you okay?" And he said, "Fuck this," you know, "Fuck this shit." And I could relate. I could completely relate. And I was glad that it was just like, thank God it's not just me. You know, this beast of a dude is suffering. Like, I legitimately have a reason to feel bad. So it sucked so bad, and I was convinced I'd made the worst mistake of my life, because I was just, like I say, New Zealand was such a comfort zone. But I hung in there, and I eventually sort of re-engaged with contacts that I made. A lot of the time, and again, you'll relate to this, a lot of the time in music world, it's not a case of just ringing people up. You kind of have to wait until you're in the same room, until fate brings you back together before you talk about jobs or opportunities. It's just rude. Hey bro, what's up? What can you do for me? You know, I didn't want to be that guy. So it took a little while, but eventually I got to tour with all these cool Aussie bands that I used to hear on the radio back in New Zealand. So, for example, there were people like Johnny Diesel and Missy Higgins and the Beasts of Bourbon. Gives you an idea of like the time period. I did a lot of smaller indies like Scream Feeder and Sekiden, who were both Brisbane bands, and lovely people, wall to wall, the loveliest people in Australia. And I did newer bands like Motor Ace and Klinger. Motor Ace are a pack of wankers. There's a couple of good guys in there. Klinger are just golden. Like, being on tour with them was like touring with the Comedy Company or something. It's just,
they're such a good band.
and yeah, really great. So hi Ben, if you're listening, they were really awesome, and I hooked up with Killing Heidi, who were the people that when I was doing the big day out, they were kind of like the people that I connected with and made friends with, because they are the nicest people in the world, you know, and the most welcoming, you know, small town kind of people. And so they took me on a tour, and it was awesome because I never did any work. I just hung out with them, and then they'd say, "Oh, we've got to go play now," and then they go play on stage, and then come off stage, and we'd just hang out. And I got paid full rate for this tour, so that was really nice. But as you know, when you get to know bands, you get to know their people. All of the support networks and, you know, managements, techs and PR people and all of the kind of different variations of humans that they've got going on. And so through the Killing Heidi guys, I met this amazing lady. I'm not sure if you know her. Her name's Nikki Jones, and she was the studio manager at Metropolis in South Melbourne back when that was still open. So for the listeners, Metropolis was what they call a hit factory. And a lot of the songs that people in Australia are very familiar with, they were recorded in there. The most famous one that I can think of off the top of my head is that song "Shut Up or Your Face."
Yeah,
that's a really sort of big bit of Australiana. But yeah, so that was Metrop, and she got on the phone to a gentleman called Paul Freeman, who was the one of the A&R guys, he was artist relations, which is slightly different, sort of like A&R Mark II for Sony here in Australia. And I got hired as a session guitarist and play. So I wasn't doing music for TV shows in a recording studio by myself. I was playing guitar for artists who were coming into Australia or who are already here, who didn't have a band. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I did a run playing guitar for that American singer Anastasia when she was out. And I did a lot of sessions with artists on shows here in Australia, like the Footy Show, the Logies and the Arias, and kind of all the big TV events, simulcast kind of, you know, things. So there are a lot of session players out there, but for a minute I was the designated rock guy, inverted commas, you know. And so there are kind of, there are videos on YouTube that other people have put up of some of those shows, and I kind of cringe a bit because it was back then, but I'm still, on the other hand, I'm still kind of like very proud and happy that it, you know, that it all happened. So yeah, I was working for Sony, which was mind-blowing, and no record contract because I wasn't the talent, so that's awesome. And then I got hired by Michael Parisi, Michael Parisi Management, who, you know, if you don't know Michael, he's like one of the biggest OG heavyweights in Australian sort of music history, and he just knows his way around all of it and everyone, and if he wants something to happen, it happens. He's such an amazing negotiator, such a cool cat, like such a deeply cool cat. And it's crazy because I was sessioning for his unsigned talent when they were showcasing with all of the major labels. So you'd have the head of Universal Worldwide fly into Sydney, and some girl from Werribee would go and sing her heart out because Michael saw something in her that was legit, you know, that was really there. And so I was kind of like the guy that would accompany them. And I remember there was one time with an artist called Katarina Torres, who's just like this monster singer, like monster voice, this Latina artist. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the millions and millions of dollars, like maybe $18 million or something. And the head of, I think it was Universal, and please forgive me if I'm not getting everybody just right, because it was all a bit of a blur at that point. But he said to Michael after the performance, you know, the artist had just finished singing, I just finished playing guitar. We're both probably a bit nervous. I know I was, probably more than she was, because she was so good. And so the head of the record company says, $18 million, 3 years. You know, like these are the terms.
Yeah.
And Michael just sort of leans back in his chair and goes, yeah, you know, call me. Like,
crazy.
if somebody said, hey, I'll give you $18 million for the next 3 years of your life, you'd just be like, where's the pen, motherfucker? Like, let's do this. And yeah, he's just one cool cat. So he gave me a lot of, again, a lot more insights and some money. Thanks, Michael, and all of that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
And then, on top of that, it was kind of like my session period. So on top of that, I also did a lot of international tours for bands just as a straight up session guy if they needed a guitar. Exactly what you're doing with Area 7.
Yeah.
Except in my case, I didn't have relationships with these people to begin with. And that was weird because when people think about touring, they think about Brixton Academy and they think about, like all the names, all of the name venues. We didn't play many of those. We did play some of them, but a lot of the places we went to were like Bratislava, Istanbul, Bucharest. Like, who do you know that's ever said, yeah, we're touring to Turkey? And it's awesome. Yeah. And people there love music and it was cool. So again, just really amazing experiences that came out of seemingly nowhere. Just, I practiced finger tapping in my room after the cheese factory and fast forward a few years and here we are in Eastern Europe, looking at a girl making out with her dog on the dance floor. Like, you see some things over there, I tell you what.
I don't even want to
It was awesome.
Ask any more about that.
It was one of the best moments. No, it was just one of those things where you remember the Mavises?
Yes.
So Becky and Nick from the Mavises were on that tour.
Right. Okay. They played some shows recently.
Yeah, they're still kicking around. They're playing as Becky and the Bullets.
Yep.
At that point. And so just this incredibly fun, energetic live band from these people who had paid their dues and knew their way around. So there was just, I don't know, when you think about bands like maybe Transvision Vamp and things like that, this is going back a million years. Sorry if you're under 50. But Transvision Vamp worked because they just had, they were selling saccharine kind of pop music, but they had a self-assuredness from experience. And that's the thing about Becky and the Bullets. If some 18-year-olds tried to pull that off, it'd just be bullshit, Yeah. Not making any comment on the songs or anything. It's just the delivery thereof.
Yep.
But in their case, they'd been around the block so many times. It was just effortless and really enjoyable. So yeah, they were there on that tour and they I'm not sure if they saw the girl making out with the dog in Prague, but yeah, everybody definitely talked about it. So it's just one of those millions and millions of tour stories that we all accumulate over time. So yeah, that's sessioning. That's kind of like the full scope of it. I stopped doing it maybe 2010, 2011. So it's quite a long time ago now. But that was my experience doing that. And that sort of led me a step closer to Temple and my first build.
Right. So what did you do after sessioning? Like when you decided to call it quits?
That's an interesting one. Because as I've just sort of talked about, I was all up in music world, and everything I was doing was related very directly to music. And this was before I started the sessioning and all of that kind of stuff. We kind of skipped over a bit, but as you know, I worked at Cole Clark when they were sort of in their setup phase of operations, and that all happened sort of before the sessions. But after the sessions, I'd turned 40 and the phone stopped ringing. And that's normal. But it kind of left me with my pants down, sort of metaphorically speaking, and I wasn't sure kind of what to do. And it got a bit tense because I was so used to just everybody, not everybody, but, being in demand for my services and being able to pay the rent, things like that. And so I took a really big sideways step, which you know about, where I became a private security contractor. And it's not like I immediately decided this is what I'm going to do. Back in New Zealand when I was being a bouncer and everything, I kind of started doing that.
Right.
But the game had changed. And in Australia, all of a sudden you had to have 50 million qualifications and all of these certification and everything, which is good for everyone. They shook up the security industry, and it's still nowhere near as good as it could be, but it was better than the wild west days. Yeah. So I got all of my kind of base level security qualifications and licenses, like armed guard, cash in transit. I got proper qualification in bodyguard work, all of that stuff. And at the same time, I threw myself into things like tactical Krav Maga. I was doing like at least 14 classes a week, which is brutal because it breaks you. It's very difficult. And also doing ISR Matrix, which is like a law enforcement focused kind of self-defense system whose main objective is to sort of isolate, stabilize, and resolve situations, which is where the ISR comes from. So you'd get someone who's, committing a crime, and you would arrest them in a way and control them in such a way where they're safe, you're safe, and the public is safe. So it's not like that traditional heavy-handed police approach. It was a very technical kind of fighting system where there weren't actually any punches thrown or anything. And that was a really interesting counterpoint to tactical Krav, where it's just like every time you block, you strike at the same time, and it's nasty, So I ended up doing all of that stuff. I was Bert Newton's bodyguard and his lovely wife Patty here and there. I had these crazy jobs where the bank, say you're a criminal, you're a bad hombre, and you've gone to prison for a long stretch, but you got a house. The bank wants your house. So they'd send me in there with a Glock 19 and a few mags of ammo, and I'd just sit in your house, order pizza and watch your TV and guard it from the inside. And nothing ever happened. Yeah. It was just the most relaxing, easy of jobs. So I did things like that. I'd do soft skin work where you're just wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a hoodie, and you go into Collins Street and pick up diamond shipments and deliver them from here to there. Working for pharmaceutical companies, delivering, like pharmaceutical grade heroin and things like that, which I've got no interest in. So it was all, I can sleep just fine, thanks. So it was all, it was all pretty interesting. And then eventually I kind of stepped up more and more and got more and more. Like I was just 100% upskilling all the time because I didn't want to be unemployed. So I was always trying to be better than the next guy. And then eventually I did a gig for the US Air Force. And then I started doing here in Australia. And then I started doing outbound contracting work in North Africa and the Middle East and everywhere else. And in the beginning I was still doing, like I must have did what they call CPP, which is the technical term for bodyguard work. I did that for every rapper on earth. Right. Like Mos Def, Phaeroh Monch, like everybody that you can think of. I did a lot of more rock bands than I'll ever remember. I looked after Henry Rollins, which was really weird because he's not a guy that you would think would need one. Yeah. And maybe he doesn't. It might have been like a prerequisite in his contract, Yeah. But next to Henry, I'm a beast. And next to me, you're a beast. So that gives you a sense of the scale of how tiny he was in reality. Not tiny, like I'm not trying to badmouth the guy. He's brilliant, but, So that was the beginning. And then I sort of drifted more and more into the outbound stuff. And as a result, rock and roll and music just kind of became a distant memory for a long time. And I felt like this is my life now, like this is what I do, and that's it, extremely long story short, sorry everyone.
I love it. This is great.
I got my foot broken, my left foot broken. I got shot in the neck, all in one day.
Jesus.
It's fine. But I came home and I had that necessary kind of recalibration period. Couldn't work, and so I just thought about what's happening, You know, what's happening now? What's happening with me? And you know, I realized a lot of things. You know, a lot of things that, you know, kind of like were really super necessary to realize, and it made me. The fundamental thing that I realized was that I didn't want to do that anymore, and there were so many reasons. Most notably, we should never, like, none of us should have ever been in the Middle East in the first place, you know, and we could talk about that, you know, forever. But yeah, I just realized that all of the things that I'd made priorities shouldn't have been priorities. And I'd just very much gone down the wrong path for a really long time. And I was definitely getting too old to be playing soldiers, you know. For people who don't know what a PSC does, it's different every day. And so sometimes you'll be escorting VIP, like business people, from an airport to a hotel. Sometimes you'll be full soldiering and everything in between. Sometimes you'll be, you know, standing under a, you know, supersonic bomber out in the desert and just stay there for 2 days, and you're all alone. And if anybody comes that isn't the military, you shoot them, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah, it was a wide and varied job, but I just reached the, you know, like when I had those injuries, it was just like great timing, and it was a wake up call,
yep.
You know. But I still needed work. And so everybody's going to hate me, but I came back and I did the Victoria Police exam.
Right.
And I passed that with a near perfect score, which surprised me more than anyone.
Why do you think people would hate you?
Oh, because, you know, Rozzers don't have the best reputation, you know. I get it, you know. Like, I obviously had friends who were cops then, and they kind of paved the way for my entry. But also, you still read the papers and hear what some of them get up to, and it's unacceptable and terrible. So, you know, they've got a bit of a PR issue that they need to sort out. And generally, people in music like to take drugs and party and get wild and free. And while I don't judge those that do.
Yeah.
And the police are the ones that like to stop you from doing that, if at all possible. So it just seemed like a sensible move. And my plan was to hopefully transition into the special operations group eventually, because that was kind of like what I already had experience with.
Yeah.
And again, fate intervened, and I was ready to go to the police training college. Mornings are terrible because everything bad always happens in the morning for me. So I was all, you know, showered up and ready to go. I had my bags. I was ready to go to police academy, which is not what they call it. And Ken Lay became the new police commissioner. So he's not anymore, but he became the new police commissioner. And he had a major beef with two things in new recruits: beards and tattoos. And I've got a lot of both of that. So even though my experience and qualifications were kind of like well beyond the level that they require for a police officer, the message was don't bother. It seemed like they didn't want the best recruits. They just wanted the most presentable recruits who may, in some cases, have just scraped past the testing. And, you know, I've always believed that it takes all kinds of different people to police a community. Like, I see Sikh police officers, and they've got their turbans, and being Sikhs, I don't know what people sort of know about other religions, but Sikh people have these things called articles of faith. So you'll see that they've got these silver bracelets on, and what you don't see is they're carrying 3 concealed knives with them called kirpans, and they're articles of faith because they're soldiers of God, so they always have to be kind of ready. But thankfully for us, Sikh people are in the main and overwhelmingly fantastic, and so there's no, you know, another Sikh stabbing this week, you know, that doesn't happen. So so I thought it sort of took all kinds of different people to get the job done. And we've all seen completely bogan cops, and it's kind of cool because they can talk to the bogans and talk them down without having an issue, you know. They can de-escalate. So yeah, I'm glad it didn't work out, because as you can see, I'm a peace-loving hippie now. Like, since I stopped contracting, I got really long hair, and I'm all peace and love. But yeah, so the experiences that I had through all different levels of security, not just the more intense stuff, it made me see the world in a completely different way. And I learned to see the people, the things that I valued, the things that I found toxic, and how to best to navigate through life while maintaining a healthy balance. And if anybody talks to me extensively, one of the things that I constantly bang on about is every single thing in life is about balance, which relates to lutherie. So while I was on this break and rediscovering myself, I had about 40 odd guitars in the apartment. I used to live in Paran, and
I would have taken up most of the apartment.
yeah, and some of them I'd bought. I used to have like a major hard-on for Ibanez, so I had like all of these Ibanez things. And one of my friends that I met through Instagram, I used to have a private profile, a personal profile on Instagram, and now I'm just Temple. That's it. But I met a guy called Simon who's in a band called Nightmare in Florida over there, and he's this super cool dude. But we kind of had a mini arms race of Ibanez guitars, and he had some killer ones, and I had some killer ones. We started sort of stockpiling. It was ridiculous. And some of the other guitars were really precious to me because they were given to me by artists on tour. That, you know, when you're a tech, it's not uncommon for them at the end of a run to say thank you and give you a guitar that in some cases is worth stratospheric amounts of money.
It's crazy.
Which isn't what it's about.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
just
not at all.
stoked that they remember you, know, or whatever. But some of them needed work. So I got on that site, stewmac.com, and I ordered, you know, the necessary tools, and I did the work, and I found it really super meditative, working on guitars instead of just bashing away on them again, you know, working on them. And I worked out that when I was working on guitars, the rest of the world and all of the kind of problems that I'd had faded into the background. And so in a very specific and real sense, my workplace had become my temple, if you will. And you and I are both non-religious people, but you know what I mean, you know?
Yeah.
A temple doesn't have to be related to, you know, a deity or anything like that.
Spirituality and religion are two different things.
That's right. So enter ayahuasca. So let's get Joe Rogan in here and Duncan Trussell. We'll have a conversation. But I put some pics up on Instagram, and I started getting DMs from people saying, can you please make me a guitar? And I just caught me with my pants down completely. I was just like, what's going on? Like, I'm just fixing my stuff. But people saw what I fixed and how I fixed it. And also, let's not forget years before, which is something we skipped over, but I worked at a place in Australia called Cole Clark, which we can talk about if you want. But I fixed these guitars. People sort of started sliding into my DMs, as the young people as the lit generation like to say.
And this is at Cole Clark?
No. This was like years later.
Right.
So I was just on Insta.
Yep.
Fixing these guitars that I got on tour or that I bought, and upgrading. And, you know, like sometimes an Ibanez will come with a shit trem, and so you got to put a decent one on and what have you. And I just realized from all of the people that started hitting me up for builds that this is probably going to be what the next significant chapter of my life is. So I never set out to be a guitar company or anything. I just kind of fell into it. And and that Cole Clark link, you know, that Cole Clark piece of my history probably definitely helped.
Yep.
Because I had pictures up of builds that I did when I was at Cole Clark, or that I collaborated on, because it's a team, you know.
Yeah.
And when we were there, like, we were looking after Josh from Queens of the Stone Age, Dave Grohl, Ben Harper, and pretty much every Australian band that we liked. It was obscene, because if there was a band like 28 Days, you know, like 28 Days are what they are, and they at that period of time were doing great things, and they seem to be on like this massive trajectory, and that's fantastic. But like, if you're just objectively honest, they're not a band that really required or deserved sponsorship. No offense, Hep or anyone else.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to sponsor them because we like Hep and everyone else. So we just threw guitars at them and everybody, and it's just terribly just irresponsible, and I'll never regret it. And we had a great time.
Awesome.
And they had a great time, and suddenly all these guitars that were only made last month or on TV and out there in the world, and people were talking, and it gave Cole Clark the start that they needed. So when people would look at my old Insta and see these guitars that we made for these, you know, very big artists, and they'd just be like, I want a piece of that. I want that guy. It was exactly like U2. Once I did U2, I was like, I want that guy to tech for me.
Yeah.
And once I made a guitar for this guy or that guy, it's like, I want a guitar from that guy. So, you know. Oh.
Who was that?
I don't know. It wasn't me. We're having, just for those that aren't in the room with us, we're having like mysterious beeping sounds.
From the direction of my phone, but I don't know. I've never heard that sound before, but anyway, we'll ignore it.
You're getting hacked.
Probably.
It's cool. Chinese people.
We're not running out of battery, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, and just to sort of put that into perspective for people, when I first got to Australia, you know, and when I was in that period of touring and everything, I met this guy that you know, Colsey, Adam Clark, who is, you know, it's like everyone agrees he's the best human that ever lived, ever, and probably ever will. So he's also, as well as being just like a rad dude, he's also an encyclopedia of guitar history, how to make guitars, how to fix guitars. He's ridiculous. And I don't know why, same as I'm on this podcast, and I don't know why, I don't know how, but when I was touring around Australia, I first got here, all these people would say to me, oh man, there's this guy, Adam Clark, and he wants to, Adam Cole, I am so sorry, Adam, that is the worst insult I could give you. We'll get to that. Adam Cole, and he wants to meet you. And I was just like, oh, I don't understand why, but okay. And so I was friends for many years in New Zealand and also in Australia with a guy called Ross International. And Ross is Nick Cave's guitar tech. He takes care of the church. He's killing it. It's just a beast of teching. And we borrowed someone's Volvo and we went out to Bayswater where Maton was, and by invitation to go out there. And yeah, we walked into that factory, and it was just like when I walked into that first stadium show, just blew my mind because it was so big. There were so many people in there doing all of these crazy awesome things and just like making guitars. Like, that's so cool. And just to give everyone listening a sense of Maton, in case you didn't know, like, they were founded in 1946, which is the same year that the Fender Musical Instrument Company was founded. So as far as Australia is concerned, you got to give props to Maton for their innovations and you know, for in the 50s when there were bands, you know, playing with a national kind of spotlight on them, they were playing Matons, you know, like this is it's as Australian as, I don't know, I'm scared to say Vegemite because it might be owned by an overseas conglomerate, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, I went in there, blew my mind, met Adam, he blew my mind, just the loveliest guy. And then I went back to my life, and a few months later he called me up and he said, I'm opening up my own dealio and I want you to come and work there. And again, I was just like, what? You know, say what? And but I said yes because it was him. And yeah, so I joined the Cole Clark crew back when it was 9 people. And by contrast, now it's 100, 200 people. It was one factory. Now it's 3 that have like doorways knocked out in between them, you know. And everybody had their own department. So, you know, Cole was in painting and all these different people. And my job was, I was in setup. So when guitars were painted, you know, they were cut out, sanded, painted, they'd come to me. I'd assemble them, I'd wire them, I'd set them up, I'd pack them and get them out of there. So I was like the last port of call and quality control, and basically making all of these disparate bits and pieces into guitars. And yeah, that was, as you can imagine, just the best education that you could possibly ask for. Did that for however long I did it. I'll say less than a year. The problem is, there was the other guy in Cole Clark is Brad Clark, and he's an asshole. And it's not just like a clash of personalities or anything, but he was the kind of guy that would bully the employees. You'd never get away with it now. Like, you know how culture and society have changed so much lately. You just can't hold sharp chisels to people's throats and say, I'm going to kill you anymore. Believe it or not, it's not cool. He didn't do it to me. But he did, he did that kind of thing, and he did it often, and he was always about intimidation and all of that. And like I say, he never did it to me, and I kind of had survivor guilt. I felt really bad because it was like, why is he such an a-hole to everybody else? And then I'm sort of just like golden. I don't understand it, but I understand it now. It's because he's a bully, and he knew that I would have given him a whack back. So, so he didn't want to do it. But it really offended my sense of justice, and because every single person that worked in that factory was just the best dude, and they were building a dream. Now Cole Clark's they won Best in Show at NAMM recently, they're killing it, even though they don't make electric guitars anymore. Losers. But it was an incredible time, and we all knew that we were there at the birth of something that's going to mean something. And just toxic, and I thought, time to get out. And so that's kind of when I started slipping into sessions and all of that. I got to apologize to all the listeners for being non-chronological like Instagram. It must be so.
Oh, that's probably my fault.
So annoying for everyone. Hey, but you were here a minute ago, and now you're over here. And what do you do for a job anyway?
I think this one was always going to jump around the shop.
Yeah, I'm crazy. Sorry, everyone.
No, that's totally fine. So if we go back to, or forward.
Rewind, but forward this time.
Rewind, but forward to people starting to ask you to make guitars.
Yes. So I did. It was pretty simple, and everything that I did was a custom build. So my first build was a 7-string multi-scale super strat with individual bridge saddles. Insane, especially being my first full build. And the interesting thing is, interesting to me, is, my paint booth.
Yes.
In the workshop. Basically, for everyone listening, my paint booth is, about 8 feet long by 5 feet wide, and just tall enough to stand up in. I'm 6'2", and Aaron is 8 feet tall, 8 or 9. And I bought that originally. It was a hydroponic marijuana growing kind of operation tent, and I got it on eBay for dirt cheap. And I set it up in the lounge room of the apartment to contain the dust, and that was Temple guitars for the first few builds. And the first few builds turned out I'd certainly do a few things different now, but I was incorporating features like blind frets, scarf jointed necks, all these kinds of things before I had any actual machines. So it was all very traditional handmade kind of deal. And I did it in that tent, and now it's very easy to chart my growth, because you go in the workshop and it's full of big intimidating machines, and then that paint booth, that tent that used to be the entire world of Temple, is now in the corner, and you'd blink and you'd miss it. So it's the smallest part of the operation.
You do spray tans in there.
Yeah, if you ask me nicely. Nitrocellulose spray tans, explosive. They're explosive. So yeah, I did those builds, and I just... clearly I liked it. It was so challenging though. Guitar making is super hard. It's super hard. And if anybody comes along and says, guess what? It's super easy. I want you to punch that person in the face, because it's not true. You're constantly, especially if you care about the product, and we all should, and it shouldn't be a product. That's a terrible thing to say. If you care about the build, then it just kind of becomes this relationship you have with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different pieces of wood, and you go through this roller coaster of emotions. It's just not easy. You might be planing back the top that's going to be the cap of a guitar, and then you find a big void in there, or if you're lucky, some insects, and all kinds of things can happen. And some of the machines we use are wildly unpredictable, like router tables. They'll grab the work and just throw it across the room if you're not super careful, and even sometimes when you are. And it's happened to people that I look up to as luthiers, and they'll message me on Insta and be like, "Oh, I'm out of the workshop today. I can't go back in. I'm terrified. This just happened." And it's a big deal. And so it's horrible for them that happened, and it's great for me, because it's cool. It happens to everyone. So I did that. And then, you mentioned recently about me upgrading my workshop. So I was in that apartment in Paran, and I thought, this is not this is not sustainable, and I was deeply unhappy kind of being in the city for a number of reasons. But I mentioned before, I sort of embarked on this journey of personal growth, and Paran wasn't the place to do that. Paran's a place to be if you want to do yoga and act like a poser, which isn't to say there aren't good people there, because they're everywhere, but it just wasn't, it was toxic for me. Everywhere, there were just people everywhere. So I elected to move to the country, and right now we're sitting in a very, very quiet and relaxed place.
It's great.
Called Lara, 3212. And this was a very, very good move for very, for a lot of reasons. And so what I did was about 14 months ago, a bit over a year ago, I'd done some builds and I'd prototyped a bunch of guitars. I've made some like telly thin lines and made them my own. Like you can see, a telly normally has a lower horn, and I cut that off. It seems like excessive to me, and I don't want to get sued. But also, if you remember the Maton MS 520 or the 520S, it's just a stripped down rock and roll machine. And for those of you people who don't get turned on by serial numbers, it was the kind of guitar that Josh played when Queens of the Stone Age started popping off. And so you'd see the videos, and if you're an Aussie musician, you'd just be like, that dude is literally playing a Maton right now. Like, oi, oi, oi. And so, that's kind of like, I love that guitar. And I love that time in history. And so that's kind of my doff of the hat, my tip of the fedora, if you will. Don't do that. So I decided it was time to move out here, and I started making some guitars and everything. I thought, you know what? If something's worth doing, it's worth doing properly. So I'm going to shut down operations for a year. And the idea was to buy bigger, scarier machines, like industrial grade machines. I'd transitioned from making everything by hand to CNC, which is computer numerically controlled, basically getting a robot to do your carving for you. Unfortunately, what I didn't think about is you have to program the damn thing. So that took a long time. It was a steep learning curve, and I'm still on it. But I just kind of shut the doors, closed the order books, and said, I'm going to sort of invest a few tens of thousands of dollars into this thing and just really make it as super precise quality and fast turnaround as possible. Like you see with that Teletron model that I gave you, I made it from concept to execution in 3 days, including finish. So that's all right.
That's crazy.
Because if you don't make guitars, you probably don't know it, but when you spray a layer of nitro or poly or whatever it is that you're using, and then you might do clear coats, you've got to allow a couple of weeks and sometimes longer for all those chemicals to do a thing called outgassing. If the finish dries with the gases in it, then you'll get bubbles, and you can see that if you've ever used things like epoxy or what have you. But now we've got these insane and highly sexual finishes that, other people won't find it like that, but I do, where you can literally put down a finish, spray an activator on it, and it is dry and it's ready to go. So right now, the world of guitar is undergoing a very sort of quiet revolution, and it's amazing for everyone involved, because it also means quicker out the door, means cheaper to produce. And not by that much, like, don't get excited, but so it was a hard decision, because I had to stop being a luthier, I guess, and just go to school and learn how to. I'm an autodidact, so I taught myself all of the software and everything, and the practical kind of things about machining that I needed to learn. And I've still got all my fingers, which is just amazing. But I just did it and stopped sort of caring about what other people were demanding from me, and just thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it as good as I possibly can. So technically the doors are still closed until April. I hoped that I'd be finished up with everything that I wanted to do and upgrade by New Year's, but life had other plans, and that's cool. It's totally fine. So Yeah, so the future is more builds that incorporate much more intense engineering behind them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to. I'm not going to promise, but my hope is to start a YouTube channel because, as well as just regular people saying, like your guitars, what can what have you got? I always get sort of, that's 20% of my DMs, and then the other 80% is luthiers, and they contact me and say, how did you do that? Or sometimes I put up like a quick tip on my Insta, and people just be like, you just blew my mind, like what the hell?
Yep.
And I had no idea. I'm just sort of doing what I do, but apparently people like my jigs and templates and hacks. And so that's what I want to do with YouTube, as well as document full builds, because I really love to meditate watching people make things, whether it's pottery or anything, drawing, painting, or making guitars. It's super cool to just chill to it. So that's something else that I want to do, but it's going to be kind of like a portal for luthiers. If they don't know something that I know, then they can know it. And I'm going to offer free 3D, plans, blueprints, files, anything that they need, so that they can just download it and get to it and just share the love.
That's awesome.
Yeah, people don't know it, but luthiers in the main aren't competitive. We all just dig guitars, and we tend to sort of meet each other and go, hey bro, like we're just cool with each other.
Yeah, I can see that. Like just reading the comments on some of your posts by other, luthiers and
just so many
guitar
cool
companies
people.
and stuff. And yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's trippy when, like legitimate guitar companies turn up in your profile. Like there's a guy who's the master builder at the Fender Custom Shop,
mm-hmm.
and he's got, thousand followers, and he follows hardly anyone. And he turned up on my profile and started like dropping comments and stuff. And I DM'd him. I said, dude, am I in trouble? Because, I do Tele Blaster guitars and Strata Blaster guitars and all this. And he was like, no way. I love your feed. I'm digging this. I'm feeling inspired. This is really cool. And that's amazing, to have like basically the creative sort of force of modern Fender turn up on my profile. I still sort of can't get my head around it, but I'm grateful. And then the funny thing is, and I'm probably just dreaming, so please forgive me, but I could swear that Fender's starting to do some pretty temple-y things lately,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, yeah, that's cool, because again, it's not about winning or, it's just, I want to see these guitars come into the world, and I don't care who makes them. There's this real, like you just kind of alluded to, there's this real bush telegraph kind of thing of luthiers on Instagram, and so most people don't see it and don't realize it, but there are competitive luthiers on Instagram, and they suck so hard, and nobody likes them, and why would you? You know what I mean? But most of us are out there asking, how did you do that? How do I do that? And I do the same. So it truly is one of those things of what goes around comes around. People will ask me for a CNC file of something that I might have put 300 hours into. Happy to share it. And so I give it to them, and then down the track they might lay down a finish that I find compelling, and I'll tentatively message them and just be like, hey, would you be so kind as to tell me how do I do that? And they'll just be like, bro, here it is, and they just send it down the line. So that's a beautiful thing, and I think it's part of like that camaraderie of musicians, because obviously everybody that makes guitars plays them. So yeah,
absolutely.
Did that answer any of your questions?
It did. It's, it's sort of it goes to show you the impact that social media is having. And the thing I noticed about your feed,
I'm scared.
No, it's the fact that like I follow a lot of the mainstream guitar companies and stuff. And
I know
a lot of
no, it's fine.
a lot of the I don't leave comments. So. A lot of them, they just post their latest stock, their new stock, new arrivals, new releases, whatnot.
The things that they want to market to you.
Exactly. Whereas you don't do any of that.
No.
You're all about giving people value. You know,
I'm so glad that somebody noticed that.
It's like you like I've learnt so much. As much as I mean, I've been playing guitars for close to 30 years, but I know nothing about building them. And like I feel like I'm getting an education from watching your Instagram feed. And it's
I couldn't be
fascinating.
more honoured, dude. That's not just a thing I'm saying. That's real.
It's like I'm fascinated by it, and I think anyone that's into guitar would get a lot of value out of it.
Well, that's super awesome.
So the YouTube idea is great.
I mean, I joke with my friend Adam. I joke around and say, I can't wait to get my 13 followers or something, and maybe I won't even get that. This is the thing about social media. I just don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
And I used to care very deeply, and you and I previously, when we first talked about this, you said I would really like to sort of touch on mental health aspects of creativity and stuff, and we can definitely do that. But like I said before, I started to realize the things that were destructive in my life, and like everybody knows, social media is just cancer. So I deleted Facebook, Twitter, everything. And I'm not trying to be like one of those guys, like I'm vegan or whatever, like I'm not trying to virtue signal, but I recognized that was just toxic in my life, all of that stuff. And the personal profile that I had, I used to be @knifey on Instagram. I don't know who's got that handle now, but that used to be me, and I put my whole life up on there. And then one day I just went, what am I doing? Yeah. And it was such a healthy move. So, we've all heard the arguments about what social media has become and how it isolates us rather than brings us together. And wow, thanks so much that you see what I'm trying to do, because I hardly ever post. I refuse to do what Instagram tells me. So I've got this huge permaban slapped on me where 1 out of every 100 people that follow me actually gets to see what I'm posting. Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit. If they care enough, they'll seek me out. Yeah. If they don't, that's fine too. I'm not here for popularity. I'm not here for numbers. I just love guitars. And so, Dan Kirby and, Trav and these other people that you've had on the podcast, they're like big time social media people, and they've got all these tens of thousands of followers, and it's like super impressive. And then there's me, and I've got, like 3.5 or something, and I appreciate those people. But social media just is meaningless to me. So I don't feed social media. I just give it what I want to give it. And what I want to give it is tools for people to use, and positivity and support. 9/10 of my, probably 99 out of 100% of what I do on social media is just answer questions in my DMs. Yep. And I feel good about that. Yeah. So, I don't know if that makes any sense. Hopefully
Absolutely.
That was relevant to the question. But yeah.
I don't actually think I asked a question. I think I was just commenting.
Okay. Well, I okay. Well, I appreciate it, because you never know what other people are thinking, and obviously social media does isolate us. I live out here in the country and don't see anyone for weeks at a time. Yeah. And so, other people's perspectives on what I'm doing are interesting to me. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for seeing that. That says a lot about you, I think. No, thank you for putting the content out there. Hey, that's so interesting, and this is lovely. And it's valuable. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and it's something that I actually enjoy and look forward to. Like, it's not the usual crap that people post. Hopefully, I don't know. I don't claim to know anything, but it's informative, and there's a little bit of sense of humour thrown in there as well. Inconceivable. That's not true. No, it is. Anyway, so tell me, what was it like to sell your first guitar? Okay. It was a relief. A relief? Yeah. Because what people don't know about lutherie is it's prohibitively expensive. And the reason that they don't know that, and I don't blame them, is because China makes guitars for 3 cents. Not really 3 cents, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, close to it.
They source their timber unsustainably in vast quantities, and they train people who have no actual love for the instrument to churn out their part of that instrument. And I mean, you know, let's be honest, I've been to like the Fender factory, or one of the Fender factories in Gibson, and all of this kind of stuff, and they just slam guitars together too, and it doesn't seem to be a lot of love, but that's just because of KPIs and, you know, the pressure of trying to operate a corporation. But China's different, and I've seen these Chinese factories. I had the offer from an outside source early on with reasonably early on with Temple, where they said, we like what you're doing, and what we're offering is we'll mass produce your guitars and market them worldwide, but we're going to make them in China, and so you can come over sort of however often you want and do QC, quality control, but we'll be able to like churn these things out for just 1/10 what it costs you to make them. And the answer was no. Because when people want a guitar made by me, they want it made by me in particular, and for better or worse. And I've sort of made myself a promise that no matter how many people want guitars, I'm never going to make more than, say, 50 a year, probably half of that. 25 a year sounds good. It's not that I can't do more, because I can do infinitely more than that. But let's just keep a lid on it. Let's just keep it quality, and let's just keep it so that Temple actually means something. That's what I'm trying to do. You know. So China is a big force, and they flood the market with all of this stuff, and a lot of people, a lot of young guitar people, like, not everybody's rich. That's the thing about social media. Everybody looks rich, but most people in the world aren't. And so you'll have some kid, you know, in Mexico, and he just wants a Kirk Hammett Ouija ESP clone, and so he'll pay $280 to China or whatever and get it, and he's not going to know the difference. Whereas you and I would touch it and just go, ew, like, this is horrible. But as long as it's got that graphic, that kid's stoked, you know? And so it distorts people's perceptions of what a guitar is. And while it's true, pontificating here, while it's true that a guitar is just literally bits of tree and metal from the ground, you know, like, it's just made of natural things. And therefore it's not really that precious as far as the components are concerned. The level of skill it takes to bring them all together in a harmoniously balanced instrument is huge, and the amount of love that you've got to have to go through it. Like, most people don't know what fret dressing is, and they don't know how much goes into it. I can just bang it out without thinking. I'm really fast at it now, and they always turn out the way I want. But obviously there was a really big investment of time and energy, and I lost so much of my eyesight, you know, trying to learn that. But yeah, you know, you got to have love, and you got to put effort into it in order for a guitar. It sounds so wanky, but you have to have love for the instrument in order for it to mean half a shit, you know? And so people don't know that. They see all these cheap guitars out there, and they just think, well, why can't you make me a guitar that cheap? They don't understand that it costs me to make a simple telly style guitar. It cost me more than $1,000 generally each guitar. And because of my view about money, if, you know, I don't have a lot of it, and that's fine. That's how I kind of set my life up. Money isn't a priority for me at all. I just don't care about it, which is terrible as a business person, inverted commas. But yeah, if I don't sell a guitar, then I can't make another one for a while. And if I do make another one and I haven't sold the one before, I've had to generate that money myself, you know? So, yeah, guitar making isn't what people think it is. And that's pretty much it. It's super expensive, it's super difficult, and people don't really understand or appreciate what's behind it. And I'm not in any way on a campaign or a quest to educate the world on how guitars, you know, I don't expect most people to care, but I do know that there are a phenomenal amount of people out there in the world like me who like to sit back with a big M a chocolate Big M and watch YouTube build videos of whatever the fuck ever. And they just chill to that.
Yep.
And then we learn things.
That's it.
And that's a beautiful thing about this social media modern phenomenon that actually works for us. Yeah.
And when you did sell your first guitar,
Yep.
and it was a relief.
Quoting me.
Sorry?
Quoting me. That's cool.
Did you get a lot of feedback?
Yeah. The honest truth of it is that the guy hated it.
Right.
He hated it.
Okay.
I loved it. And I've got pictures of it up on my Insta, and you can make up your own mind.
Yeah. What did you hate about it?
It's the Super Strat with the New Guinea rosewood top. It's beautiful. He hated the neck heel joint arrangement. And so, being a human being, I wasn't formed perfectly, and I evolve over time. And so with that build, I actually have a Blogspot account that I don't touch anymore. But when I was first starting out at that apartment in Paran, I've documented with photographs the entire build process and explained with words what was going on.
Yep.
And that's a thing that I like to chill to too. So there's that. If you give, if you're into that kind of thing, it's out there. But the main purpose of it was the customer was in Sweden. Sweet guy, really lovely guy, and he had the opportunity through this blog to constantly be updated on build progress, and every single thing that I did was run by him first. It was his custom build, and I wanted him to be happy. So we literally spent 3 days at one point just messaging back and forth, trying to work out what kind of fret dots to put on it, and that I guess that's as you would expect, right?
Yeah.
So I did this heel joint, and I showed him every step of the way. And the thing about the heel joint was now I can do fully like liquid heel joints, and I can impregnate them with carbon fiber sheets and carbon fiber rods in epoxy. So the apocalypse can happen, and that baby isn't moving for anyone. But back then I didn't have access to that stuff. I wasn't au fait with the processes. So what I did was just made the strongest compromise. Now, when you play a traditional Fender guitar, and in many cases with Gibsons too, they got a big blocky heel joint. And the reason that they did that is because back in the day when Leo was designing the Tele or the Strat, no one was up there going, whittly, whittly, wow. Yep. Nobody. Those frets were just kind of there as a courtesy. Hey, buy a Strat, get these extra frets, 21 or 22, who really gives a shit? Just play some surf rock and have a good time. But I always hated them, and so on my prototypes and the guitars that I'll be releasing out into the wild in the next year, they're all fluid and organic, and that's really important to me. Ergonomics are super important. This is terribly wanky, but it all feeds into that non-religious spirituality that we were talking about before. The form of the guitar and how it feels in your hand, that's everything. And maybe you're different, but I would forgive a guitar that was tonally kind of deficient or a little bit retarded tonally if that fretboard and my interaction with it just felt so good. Yeah. When sometimes you play a guitar and the way the strings spank is just wow. I got a Strat like that, I got a Fender like that, and it's just, I'll never sell it. Yeah. Because of that reason.
Yeah, I've got a Gretsch the same. Like, I love playing.
Oh, you got a Gretsch?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, it's a $1,000 cheap.
I'm just hassling.
Gretsch.
I'm jealous. Gretsch is beautiful.
Yeah. I love playing it, but it sounds like shit. Like
it's just got that feel,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I have no idea what we were talking about, but I do know that I was talking about sort of, organics, and I was talking about that guy's build. So I want my guitars to be organic. And so that heel joint was very much a compromise between a blocky, solid, well-engineered, strong heel joint with organic elements brought in. So if you can imagine the guitar's on its face and you're looking at its bum, and looking at its back, it flowed up beautifully, but the sides were still square. Right. And whereas now I would round it all over, and you've seen that, and everybody on my Insta's seen that. So I documented it fully. And when he got it, he opened up the case and he was messaging me in real time over in Sweden, and he said, you know, he took a photo of the case and of it open, and I slipped some Adventure Time stickers in there because, you know, let's be cute and weird. And he was stoked. He was absolutely stoked. And then a day or two later, he sent me this email, and it really broke my heart. And I felt like it kind of broke his heart too. And he said, I'm really unhappy, and this is why. You know, the heel joint has this shape which was less of a heel joint than a Fender. Bear in mind, this was a 7-string multi-scale, so the heel was substantially bigger.
Yep.
But he just said, yeah, for this reason and a couple of others. That the other thing, I can't even remember what the other things were, but when I told him why they were, he was just like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, don't worry about it. But the heel was an issue. And I said, like, well, if you want to, you know, you can just get a file, because it was an oil finish. So you can just get a file, sandpaper it, and then just touch it up with some true oil and rub on it, and you'd never know. You can literally form it how you want.
Yep.
Because by that stage the neck was glued in. It was solid.
Yeah.
So that's the honest truth. My first customer was wildly upset, and he didn't want to send the guitar back. And I was disappointed because I would have loved to have owned it. But I've got the photos, and that's about that. But he was the only person in my life that I've ever disappointed as a tech or as a luthier or anything. And it hit me really hard. But, you know, when these things happen, you've just got to kind of be pragmatic and do the internal math and just go, I did everything I could to make sure this guy was happy. He wasn't happy. He didn't want to send it back. So really, I'm just going to hands off, but, you know, move on, but learn the lesson and never do that again.
Yeah.
And so now my guitars are fluid and lovely, and it, you know, like I said, I was just starting out. I couldn't have done anything differently.
Yeah.
Now I can do anything you want, and I'm super arrogant, and don't worry about it. You know, so yeah.
Speaking of the multi-scale,
Speaking of your famed arrogance,
like you've another thing that you know has attracted me to your guitars is the fact that you can do anything. You can build anything from, you know, these classic looking guitars behind me to the aforementioned 8-string, 7-string multi-scale beast.
Just for the record, I don't do 7 strings anymore.
Just 8.
6 or 8.
6 or 8.
Make a decision.
Why not 7?
Get an 8 and take the 8th off.
Right.
I can't be bothered. I told you, I'm arrogant now. I mentioned Simon Howerman before, who's in Nightmare and used to be in a band called War from a Harlot's Mouth. And if you're into like extreme metal, he's a freaking superstar. And he is a huge, like he's a guy that obviously was influenced by Dino Cesare's Fear Factory, 7 strings, deeper tunings, all of that kind of stuff. So Simon has all kinds of weird kind of tunings, and he's got a real ear. He's a producer, and so he knows what works for him, and he's got nothing to prove.
Yep.
You know how some people like Jared Dines are out there playing like a 50-string harp, you know, as a guitar, and it's just kind of like there's an arms race for how many strings you can put on. My personal opinion, and it's just my personal opinion, I don't expect anyone to subscribe to it, is that 8 strings are very cool and 6 strings are very cool. And because you've got both of those things covered, a 7 string is kind of just doesn't matter. Whereas my friend Simon, who I was just mentioning, he'll play 6 strings that are radically detuned if they've got a long enough scale length or if they're baritone or something like that. But generally 7 strings are what he likes. And so, you know, as long as he's going to behave like that, he's never going to get a guitar from me. You know, I completely, like, he knows way more than I do about extended range guitars and all of that kind of stuff. And I absolutely bow before his superior wisdom, but I'm still not going to make 7 strings. Yeah. I just go somewhere else, you know. That sounds horrible, I know, but I just want to make guitars that I fucking love.
Yep.
And 8 strings are still so unusual, especially when you got a multi-scale, especially when you got an 8-string multi-scale with a wangy bar on it.
Jesus Christ.
You know, with a whamalo up in there. So, yeah, I just want to do things that I like. But you kind of mentioned that I do these kind of crazy, very modern guitars, and then I do these classic guitars. But the common theme is that, again, organic curves and all of that kind of stuff. But when you look at one of my tellies, it's clearly, it harkens back to a Fender telly, and it's very faithful in a lot of ways, but it's also completely me in other ways. And when I do a hot pink multi-scale Explorer, that's still me as well. So I don't discriminate, and I find the common ground by getting these ultra-modern guitars and giving them beautiful classic curves and organic transitions and things. And I get these classic guitars and I modernize them by putting scarf jointed necks in them and doing transitions and adding carbon fiber and all of this kind of stuff. So, you know, when I make like what makes a temple guitar? Well, I make them, you know? So when I make it, I've honestly just never thought about, this might upset a few of the fans or whatever. It's just like, no way, they love it. Yeah. The more crazy I get, the more everybody's out there going, you go, man. You know, like, it's just, there's a lot of positivity and good vibes and encouragement. So, yeah, you know, do the classics a bit differently and get these modern guitars and give them some classic features as well, because they're classic and they're still with us. So they must have worked on some level. Yeah, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just answer my question, my next question. So that's good.
God damn it.
No. This is good. Do you have sort of like any preference on what you do? Like, how do you, let me rephrase that.
I'll wait.
How do you decide? How do you decide what you're going to make, what your next project's going to be?
It's hard.
Like, if it's not for a customer.
Yeah. I hate to bring it here, but this is just like the answer that comes to mind. Like, you know that for the last week or so, I've been grieving the loss of a very dear friend, and the problem was I had to go out on a job, and it was early morning, and it was about 15 minutes before I had to walk out the door. I swear I'm going to answer your question. And I looked at the news, and the news said that my friend Annalise had been found dead in her apartment, and it was tragic. And in my life, I've had death around me all the time, and I was always really stoic about it. People so close to me died. I had my, my ex-girlfriend that I loved very much. She committed suicide, and so I'd always just gone, okay, sad, but it didn't stop me or slow me down, didn't mess me up. And I thought, this is just who I am, and I could bank on it. And I found out about Annalise, and I had a, we had a very sort of interesting relationship, and I just wasn't ready for it, and it blew my mind apart. And as I said, I had to go out on a job, and I was just in bed crying for the first time in years. And I hope that no one listening knows what this feels like, but unfortunately most people do. And at the same time, I was so rocked because I didn't know that I didn't know I cried. I didn't know. I'm not ashamed of it or anything, but it really caught me unawares, and the depth of feeling, and of course all of the different, what could I have done, all the questions that people ask, and I had to go, I had to go, and I had to get that money. So it was like, I talked to myself a lot, and living out in the country, you can get away with it. But yeah, I did some self-talk, which I really believe in as part of mental health and creativity. And people like Marcus Aurelius, who's one of the greatest thinkers of all time, was a massive proponent of self-talk, journaling, introspection, anything that puts you in touch with you, And so I just said to myself, as everybody has to, get your ass in the shower, dickhead. This is all very sad, but you can't afford to break down right now. And she doesn't want you to break down right now, So get it. And how's this for a terrible kind of link? But it's exactly the same kind of thing when you're making a guitar, but in a more joyful way, where I'll sit down and basically like I'll see something on Instagram and I'll go, yuck. And I do that a lot with guitars. I just think, why the fuck did you do that? And things that I would never do, like those guitars that have like epoxy, they're two different bits of wood and they're epoxied together, or LED fret markers, or like pictures of Madonna airbrushed on your guitar. Like, go fuck yourself. Yeah? I have strong feelings about that. And so I'll see these things and I'll just go, that's shit. Here's what I'd do, you know? And then I end up with a file of all of these kind of inspo guitars. And it's, instead of being a negative thing and being grief-stricken, it's just like you're overwhelmed with desire to make all of these great-looking guitars. And, you know, there are so many different kinds of sunburst. Did you know that? You know, and they're all rad. So, and you can make one guitar and give it one sunburst and then make an identical guitar and give it a different sunburst, and one is going to be the clear winner, you know? So, so you just got to make a decision. You got to sit down and just be really brutally hard with yourself and forget about, oh, my heart is so on fire for this right now or that right now. You just got to go, what's next? Make a decision. Just get in the shower, dickhead. You know what I mean? So my mind is broken. I'm sorry, everyone. But that's how I think. So when it comes to making guitars, it's really, really, really hard. And it makes me upset a lot of the time because there's so many beautiful things that I want to share with my 15 followers. But there's just no money. There's not enough time. Well, there's not enough money. There's not enough time. And sometimes I just have to prioritize things. So an example of that is when I was still in Paran, I prioritized tellies. And that's why I've got telly thin line style guitars, unless you're from Fender, in which case they're nothing like it. Deluxes, I mixed them up and made deluxe lines. Classic tellies, but I modernized them all, you know, and not modernized like that guy from, is it Slipknot? That plays the tellies? Is it somebody? Oh, I can't remember what his name is because I'm not big into him, but he's got his own kind of like range of tellies and everybody. Jim Root, is it?
Possibly, I'm not sure. Yeah,
cool. So he's a big telly guy, and I think John 5 is a big telly guy. And again, he's not a guy that I really follow, but I just went, let's make tellies. And I'm a Strat lover. Like Stevie Ray is everything to me. But tellies, I just decided tellies, and it's been pretty good so far. So that's where it is. It's a really hard decision to make. It's like if you're a billionaire and you can eat anything for dinner that you want, you just got to make a decision. You know, and I guess it's a good problem to have. Oh, I've got all this infrastructure and the ability to create all these guitars. But then you got to pick one.
It's a good analogy.
This probably isn't, but that's kind of you think.
Well, it made sense to me.
We got there.
And not a lot makes sense to me, so well, let's talk about your workshop itself.
Yes.
Which is your garage converted.
And I'm going to do, for those interested on YouTube, if I get around to doing the YouTube, I'm going to do a full build from the ground up. So if you're a person that's like, awesome, I think I'd like to be a luthier, I'm going to show you everything that I did, and you can copy me and I'll give you the files and the blueprints, or else you can say, that guy's an idiot, and go your own way. And either way, I've done my job. So.
That's awesome. I guess, I mean, we're not sitting in the workshop at the moment.
Negative.
We're in another little creative area that you've got here.
We're in the tech room. Which has been set up in anticipation of the YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks, man.
No worries.
I never come in here because I'm not doing YouTube yet, but, you know, there you
go. Walk us through what you've got in the workshop.
Okay.
As best you can.
Okay. I don't think it would be like a sensible idea to talk about all of the individual machines and stuff that are in there, because if you're a woodworker, you kind of know what you need. You kind of know what like it's a woodwork operation.
Right. It does look like that, when you walk in.
But the thing about luthiers is they like to generally, a lot of them like to make their own tools and to make their own templates and jigs. So a jig is a thing. It's basically kind of like a machine. Might not have any moving parts, or it might, but it's sort of something that you use to interact one tool with a workpiece. So say if you think about an output jack on a telly, how they've got those things called electrosocket jacks that fit in flush with the body, and they have to be positioned perfectly, you know, in the middle of that 45 millimeter depth of the body and along the center line of that edge. And so I made a jig where you just clamp your body in and you get a router and you plunge it down, and when you take the body out, it's perfect. And that means that you can do that operation again and again by hand, repeatedly and accurately every time, and it just saves you heaps of time and stress too, because 99% of lutherie, I think, is measuring things and then measuring them 15 more times, because once you cut that beautiful piece of mahogany or koa, you're screwed if you didn't do it right. So jigs are really, really good in that respect, and it's really surprised me, because the thing that makes me different, and I think you alluded to this earlier, was a lot of luthiers kind of hit me up for my technology, the things that I make to make my life easier. The irony is now I don't need any of those jigs because I've gotten so attuned to my CNC machine and designing for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I the thing about my workshop, if a woodworker, a salty old woodworker walked in there, he'd yell at me for having a CNC machine because they're apparently blasphemous. But they could spend 5 minutes just poking around in the cupboards and having a look, and then they could go and build whatever they need to build, because it's all going to make sense to them. But the thing about it is, it's not set up where wood comes in one side and guitars come out the other. It's not chaotic, but because I make so many different types of guitars and I do so many different things, which is just expected, it's not just me, it's everybody, there's kind of like a central area that I work from, and then everything kind of radiates out from that. I've got a lot of modular infrastructure and things like carts on wheels where everything's all in there. I don't go for drawers, because things just go in there and get lost forever. And so, you know, I try and get all my tools out there and in your face and usable. But people can see it in bits and pieces on Insta, and they'll see deeper into it in YouTube if I'm not lazy. But it's not, I don't think it's much to look at in the way that when you look at BMW or Tesla and where they're making things and it's like, whoa, this is incredible. It's probably not like that for most people. But at the same time, I've had to kind of, in the year that I've closed the doors, build it into something that it's going to look good on camera. So it's a set as well as a workshop. And you can see that when you look up, and just like a sitcom, you know, you got the sitcom set and then you look up and there's just all these intense lights and things. So that's kind of like what would make my workshop a little bit unique, because it's not just a workshop. But the center of it now, like I say, is the CNC machine, and the CNC machine's been developing over time. So it started out just as a regular CNC machine and it was okay, and now it's this super precise, ridiculous piece of high technology, and then in late March, early April, it's getting another upgrade, and it's turning into like Voltron. You know, it's going to be much bigger, even more precise, to like hundredths or thousandths of a millimeter every single time. Super strong, so it's just going to eat wood. You know, all this kind of stuff. So I'm excited about that. And it's gotten to the point when I think about the workshop that I look at all these tools that I spend so much money on and so much time buying and worrying about obtaining and everything, and I just don't need 99% of them anymore, because I do my modeling in the computer, and it allows me to go in, and if a bee's dick had a dick, I'd be able to be right up in there and look at individual molecules, you know what I mean? And that gives me a huge amount of control to a certain extent, because wood moves and nothing's ever simple. So it's like, oh yeah, I've designed it perfectly. And then you go somewhere humid and it's like, oh, it's a different piece of wood now. But that's my workshop. You know, I've got all the usual things like bandsaws and table saws and routers and all of that kind of stuff, and none of that's very exciting. And sometimes I still will just bang things out by hand here and there.
Yep.
You know, because I've got that flexibility. But yeah, I guess the short answer is check it out on Insta or YouTube. And that is not a plug.
No.
I hate social media, and I'm not into marketing. I don't care if none of you follow me or everyone does. I probably won't follow anyone back. But if you message me and you're a human being and you want to connect, I'm there, dude. Like, let's be friends. So yeah, hopefully
Highly
all of those
recommend.
answers.
Highly recommend checking it out. It's awesome. What's would you say is one thing in the workshop that you couldn't live or you couldn't operate without?
Yeah,
and that can be, you know, a piece of machinery. It can be your CNC machine, which is pretty impressive to watch, by the way.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
It is
Watching
fun.
a
It's
robot
cool.
do
Yeah, I know.
things
It's like watching one of those like 3D printers almost.
in reverse.
Yeah.
Because it takes away material. Look, that's a really great question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ask it to all my guests.
And just another one. But I'm sorry to give you such a dull answer, but this is the truth. The one thing in the workshop I couldn't function without is a highly accurate rule, which is what you call a ruler if you've got an education.
I thought you were going to say like no shoes or something.
Yeah. I'm not. I'm terrible for safety, so yeah, I've got to lift my game if I start recording things, because I'm going to have all these salty old people saying, you can't do that.
Yep.
And they'll be right, you know. But something that most people don't realize is that if you buy a rule from here or a ruler from here and a ruler from there and you put them together, they're going to be different.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't know that. And so it's really important to invest money and buy precision engineered squares, rules, things like that. Because even if you're out, like I say, by 1/10 of a millimeter, that matters, especially if you're cutting fret slots or something. You've got to intonate properly. It's not negotiable.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's just a stupid metal ruler. Get a really good one, and everything else, literally everything else, flows from that.
Yep.
Because you got to start with your dimensions. So that's how it is.
That's crazy. That's something I would never have thought of.
Well, me neither. But you know, you mentioned the CNC machine. If we got stranded on a desert island and I had my knife with me, I could still make guitars. Take forever, and I'd be really grumpy, but we'd get there. And that's just it. You know, the tools. You've probably heard this from old people a million times. People even older than me, but the tools, they're not what matter. You know, they just get you there. And there's so many different ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So the CNC, it's lovely when I can just set it up. And, you know, just to be clear, I might have spent hundreds of hours or literally 2 weeks working on something before I'll cut it. So it's not a cop-out, you know, and I can do it by hand if you want. I got nothing left to prove.
Yeah.
But when you set that CNC machine off in motion and then I can go off and do other things, awesome. I got an employee and I'm not paying them shit.
Yeah.
You know? So
It's electricity.
Yeah, well, let's not go there.
I can imagine the bill would be.
It's not pretty, but it's necessary, and it, you know, like I say, it adds to the overall cost of guitars. And you know, if you're listening to this and you're wondering, oh, okay, Temple, you know, I just made you sound like an idiot, and you're thinking, yes, Temple, you know, how much does a Temple guitar cost? I'm so intelligent. I don't get out of bed for less than $3,000, and again, you might think he's so arrogant. You'd be right, but it's just economically not viable. And the amount of, you know, it takes about 100 hours more or less to make a guitar, depending on the guitar, like how long is a piece of string.
That's it.
But it's intense.
If
and
you break that down to an hourly rate, it's not a lot.
It's nothing. You know, I do this for the love. I really, really do. And so does everyone else that I know that does it.
Yep.
You know, no one's trying to be rich. This is the wrong game for that.
Yep.
You know, build a time machine.
Just being a musician in general.
Invest in Bitcoin in 2016 and get out in the summer, and that's how you do it. But don't go into making guitars. So yeah.
What's your day-to-day look like?
I'm glad you asked, because following you on Instagram, you get up at 4:30 every day and you smash the gym and you eat healthy and you're a loving husband and father, and you go to work and you destroy hundreds of dollars worth of bottles in one go with your forklift.
Yeah, I'm quite good at that.
That's awesome. I love it. I know you don't love it, but I love those posts. And you're all about inspiring everyone to be better, and I don't do that. So,
well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, but from my perspective, as far as like day-to-day activity is concerned, the reason is from childhood I was diagnosed with complex PTSD and dysthemia, and this is a thing that you said you wanted to talk about, like the mental health stuff, and I really, especially with the events recently, I really am glad to have the opportunity to talk about it. So dysthemia, if you don't know what that is, it's basically another name for persistent depressive disorder, which is considered to be a generally untreatable form of depression. It's like if your depression has depression.
Right.
And in my case, it means I have super high levels of suicidal ideation and anxiety that never stops. So I've learned to put on a good face in public, and this is like my dirty secret, because a lot of people meet me and they think he's so confident and everything, and it's a lie. It's a complete lie. So I put on a good face in public and no one can tell, but inside I'm a mess, and I'm always a mess, and I'm a mess right now. There's this anxiety inside of me that's just always been with me. It's never left. So some days I'm up early enough to see you post your first Insta of the day, and other days I'm in bed for 2 weeks. I'm unable to cope, can't move, and I'm just trying to find a reason to stay alive, like literally just how am I meant to hang in here, And that's not glamorous at all, but it's the truth. So I moved out to the country here, and I have the benefit as a result of that to be able to go for long hikes in the country and to be around animals and all of that kind of stuff. We have like blue tongue lizards in our lounge room and hallway making appearances and things like that. And I love that. I love that. So I guess waking up in the country is a daily habit that I've set up for myself because I moved out here on purpose. But when it comes to routine, I know for a fact that I can't keep one. And I don't know how I did it for as long as I did in the other roles that I played, but I know that trying to hold it together did damage to me, So it's really important in my case to not have a routine, and that's one of the things that I was really excited to kind of talk about on here, because with the writer's block and the Insta and the podcast, it's about it's about direction, and it's about connecting people with strategies to achieve their their goals and their objectives and to live a healthier, more balanced life. And I'm all about that. But here I am saying, hey, guess what? It's not about, for everyone, because everyone's different, it's not about getting up every day and doing what you do for everyone. Works for you and it's great. You look great. But for me, that would be very, very injurious to my health. So yeah, it took ages to acclimatize because of those old roles that I used to play, and in both of those roles as a bodyguard and a tech, you have to have backups and contingencies for every little thing, threat and risk analyses, and you plan every move long before you make it. And now the only planning I do is I make space around my engagements or my responsibilities in case, so I've got a window on either side of it of a week or whatever, in case things get dark and I need to disengage from life for a while. So no routine is the best routine for me, and it keeps things fresh and interesting, let's just say. So yeah, that's the best way I can answer that one.
That's fascinating, and I appreciate you being so open and honest about it.
No, it's important to me, actually. It's really important to me.
It's crazy because when...
Am I allowed to drink a sip of water?
No, you're not.
Okay,
not at all.
I'll just hit up this whiskey.
The reason I wanted to talk about mental health, and I'll have a few other people on the podcast, hopefully, to talk about this topic, because I think it's obviously very important.
Yeah, it totally is.
It's because I would always see this correlation between mental health and depression and creatives.
Yes.
And musicians and it's because most of the creative people, like all the creative people I know, they've either come from a fucked up childhood or
They're suffering,
you know,
man.
you know, there's something broken there, and we're all like that,
Yeah.
you know. And I sort of wanted to sort of piece all that together, and you know, when I was first putting together this idea, the year before last, I think it was the same time that Chris Cornell took his life.
Yep.
And then old mate from Lincoln Park, Chester, as well. And I was like, what is going on here? Like,
Especially because both of those guys were attractive dudes with all the money in the world. They were adored by literally millions of people, and they were ridiculously talented.
Yeah.
Can I just share a meme verbally that I read?
sure.
I saw a meme about Chester, and it was just, I think it was taken from Reddit, so it was a screen grab. And this guy had gone to a Linkin Park concert, and he said, man, I was watching the concert, and he was singing, and his voice, I just thought, his voice is just about to crack, like he was just giving it everything.
Yeah.
His voice was just about to give out, and then I remembered, this is Chester fucking Bennington, and it was just like, nailed it.
Yeah.
That guy couldn't sing badly if he tried.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So there's a bit of like celebrating Chester, you know. But you're right. The correlation is there. And you have people like Lady Gaga, who's ridiculous, but so influential. And she's being really open about mental health. You got people like Kristen Bell, the guy that plays Captain America, Chris Evans, just Ellen DeGeneres. You've got all of these like legitimate megastars coming out and saying, yeah, guys, I got depression and I'm suffering.
Yeah.
You know, my friend Annalise passed because she had horrific depression. And actually, I'm really glad to have the opportunity to talk about this, because one of the things that we talked about regarding this was when she kind of realized that she wasn't just grieving for horrible things that had happened in her life, but she actually had a legitimate problem with depression. You know, she went to her friends and she told them about it.
Yeah.
Are you okay? No, I'm not. And she got hostility and everybody got angry. Well, not everyone, because she had some wonderful people in her sphere of influence. But yeah, there was just so much hostility, and she'd even spoken about it in the media and stuff, because people's way of thinking is, you're gorgeous. You know, like she's one of the world's top 20 most beautiful women, constantly voted, been a model since she was a kid, you know, a young woman, all of this kind of stuff. She was a multimillionaire. She's traveling the world. She was adored by everybody that met her and lots of people that didn't. So, you know, the concept is, from an external point of view, bitch, you got everything. Shut the fuck up.
Yep.
You know, don't talk to me about you can't get out of bed, right? And I had the same thing when I first started talking to people, because they'd say, oh man, you live behind the velvet rope most of the time, you're off on tour, I'll talk to you, and it's just like, which rock star did you know? Or this is the thing I remember, I used to do like lunch with people and stuff, and my phone would ring, and so people would see who it was, and they'd just be like, oh yeah, you know, because sometimes it would be someone that has a profile or what have you.
Yep.
They're people too. They like to have lunch. And so when I'd talk about depression, they'd just be like, fuck off. You're killing it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got no right. And the thing that people don't understand is, well, most people don't understand, for a start, that money isn't the answer to anything. And it's great to be able to pay your bills and everything, but it's not the answer, and it's nothing to strive for. You know, it's destructive, and greed is the root of all evil. You know, I'm not religious, you're not religious, but you'll take good wisdom where you can find it, whether it's on the Bible or on a toilet wall at uni. And it's the root of all evil. They've known it for thousands of years, and it's true. So, you know, people don't seem to understand beyond that depression doesn't give a shit who you are or what you've got. It just hits you, and it hits you so fucking hard. And you either work out strategies to cope or you don't. And unfortunately, Chris, you know, Kurt, Cobain, all these amazing people that we've lost, they lost because they made a short-term decision for a long-term problem. And I think my mum kind of said it the best way to my way of thinking, she'd say, sometimes you're on top of your own personal mountain, and sometimes you're at the bottom of the sea and you're drowning. But when you're down there, you're always going to stand on a mountain again. That's life. It's a roller coaster. You know? Life is a highway. So, that's just the way it is. And when you're in this immense pain and you're just gasping for relief and just please turn this off, a shotgun will turn it off, but it means that you're off forever. And unfortunately, the people that we've been talking about, they decided that was a decision they were prepared to make. Yeah. And it wasn't about, I don't care about my family or the people that love me or anything. It's just, I'm in anguish. Please make this stop. So, that's the extreme kind of limit of it. And then sort of before that, you've got great songs that come out of this suffering and this confusion and this desire. I can't get no satisfaction. This is nothing new. And it's all the same, only the names will change. If you know that one, then you're cool.
It's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting to note that, so many brilliant things come out of these, or come out at these low points.
Balance.
You know what I mean?
They have to.
Yeah. We used to joke about it within Behind Crimson Eyes all the time, that when our singer Josh would have a girlfriend, he'd be all happy and everything's cool.
Yeah.
But when he'd break up with that girlfriend,
that's when the hits would start coming.
That's when he would do his best work.
Yeah.
And we'd often joke and say, we need to get rid of this one.
Yep.
We need to get rid of the girlfriend. Because we knew Angry Josh, Down Josh, was the most creative one.
Yeah, he can bark like a dog, can't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
But that just sort of, brings me back to my point that, creative things and good things can come from these low moments.
Absolutely can, and that's the important thing to remember. It's a cliche, but if you're going through this stuff, reach out, call Lifeline, whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
Whatever it takes, because you might think that you don't have value, but guess what? You're wrong.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
And that's not to say sort of every life is precious and all of that kind of stuff. There are some shitty people out there in the world. We know that. But in my experience, the vast majority of people who are suffering and going through these things, they're not the shitty people, and they don't mean any harm to anyone else. They just, there's a love deficit in the world, and that's kind of weird for a couple of metal dudes to sit around talking about. But man, you could get any two metal dudes in the world, and I guarantee they'll agree with you, because metal people are the best people. But do something. Don't make stupid decisions, because they are stupid decisions. And although you might not realize it, the people that you leave behind are just left with questions and anguish that never goes away. So don't do that to them either. That's my PSA.
What do you do you talk about sort of meditation a lot. What do you do to switch off?
Yeah, so I listen to ASMR videos on YouTube.
Which stands for?
ASMR, or Auto Meridian Sensory Response or something. Right. It's those things where people are like, they might get their phone and be like, do tapping, or they might do wet mouth sounds, which I can't stand. I think it's creepy. There's this one lady who is from Russia, and she's just got this really gentle way of talking, and it just gives you those tingles up and down your spine. And I don't do it for the tingles. I just do it because in my life, I lead a very solitary existence, and I'm very I don't not like people, but I'm very antisocial. And so it's a really nice way for me to, in my own room, in my own space, in a completely non-sexual way, to appreciate feminine energy and to be soothed and nourished by that. So I listen to ASMR videos on YouTube. I eat delicious food, which is awesome. Go for big hikes in the country, like I mentioned. I spend lots of time every day journaling and being introspective. Like, that's huge for me. Trying to understand myself, my motivations, calling myself on my bullshit. Like, I refuse to think a thing just because it's convenient, and I love it when I'm wrong. So if I say something like, this is the case, and then someone else comes on and goes, actually no, check this out, you're wrong, I'm like, thank you. Whereas most people are kind of like, yeah, get fucked.
Yep. Yep.
I love that. Nothing turns me on mentally more than perspectives. So I'm sort of always trying to walk that thing I call the path, which is the path to self-betterment. And it's great when you meet people who are on the path also, and it doesn't matter where on the path they are, doesn't matter where they're at, just so long as they're on there, that's all I care about. So that's nourishing to me. But every hour spent kind of being introspective is an investment in a better future. I truly believe that, because I'm living it.
Yep.
And I also do what I can to not get too on in the first place. So going back to religion and wisdom, Buddha said a lot of things that made sense. And it makes a lot of sense to me when he talks about being more dispassionate. So instead of investing in outcomes, and you mentioned this also, revealing your Buddha nature, but talking about the writer's block and its future, and instead of investing in outcomes and timelines and saying, I want this, you've said, this is a thing that is going to unfold as it will. And that's, to me, that's the best possible attitude you can have and the best recipe for success. Because, as they say, the road to, what is it? The road to disappointment is paved with something, and you can look it up yourself because you're all smart. But just don't kind of invest in outcomes. Don't say this is how it's got to be. And when you connect yourself to something and you cling tenaciously to it, then you're setting yourself up for a fall, and that's basically what that is. Another thing is I'm super selective about my interactions with people. I've said that before. I don't want to get polluted by toxic attitudes. I don't want vampires in my life, or people that thrive on drama. They don't know that what they're doing isn't good, but it's not good.
It's so toxic.
It is. I don't drink or take drugs. I'm not moral about it, but that's my personal kind of thing, and I haven't for 2 decades.
Yep.
If people want to party, that's cool, but I don't. I like those T-shirts where it's like, I don't want to party or whatever. It's kind of cool now. Instead of fear of missing out, people are talking about joy of missing out. And it's like, yeah, my people are awakening.
Yep.
So I focus on gentle and beautiful things in life, simple things, natural things, and eschew, if you will, all of the constructs that have been so ubiquitous in modern life, and that stretches to social media, and everything, everything. So I'm only on Insta, that's it, just as temple, and deleting everything else was kind of like that fad for minimalism. Once I deleted all of that extra profile, and I used to have artist profiles up and music that people could listen to and all of that, and I just did my best to delete all of it. Not because I'm not proud of it, but who gives a shit? There's so much information out there. And I don't want to be one of those people that's standing up on social media going, look at me. Yeah. Because there's just too much of that, Look inside yourself. How's that? Try that one. So, yeah, I'm not going to be told how to live my life by an app. And stepping away from that was super healthy and cutting off from toxic things. We've talked about I post really sporadically and I use it how I want. So I'm not kind of connected to Instagram all the time or anything else, constantly checking my phone. I don't give a shit. And in fact, that's something I need to lift my game, because I do have a lot of genuine good people want to contact me, and I might not get back to them for 2 days, and I'm not happy about that. I'd like to lift my game there, but that's just an interpersonal thing, not a social media thing. So yeah, that's how I turn off, is try not to engage with toxic things in the first place. And then the things that do work for me, and that I know that they work and thlike beautiful and nourishing, just do them. Yep, that's pretty simple, really. Yeah. I'm not that smart, dude. Yeah, it sounds like a smart sort of approach to it all. Well, it seems to be working so far. So. Yeah, no, that's good. What would you say have been some personal highlights throughout all this? I mean, you've got so many. That is true. Yeah. So cut me off anytime. I'll never forget hanging out after a spoken word tour with Rollins on a street corner and he was going to go in and up to his hotel room. And we had a couple of friends in common from touring world, from music world. And you'll notice that I've got an Einstürzende Neubauten tattoo on my wrist, which most people equate with Rollins, but it's actually a German industrial band from the 90s, 80s. And I met the bass player when I was in Dubai, of all places, playing in a like commercial duo. Stereotypically beautiful, talented singer, and this dude playing guitar and backing tracks in a fancy hotel. And I met Mark Chung there. He was talking to the singer, and she introduced me, and he was like, "Oh, nice tattoo, thanks for getting that." And I had no idea who he was, and it just blew my mind because that's the only band tattoo that I have. And I was just like, I am talking to Mark Chung, I can't believe it. Yeah. And he was also the senior vice president for Sony Music Europe. So it's not like he's just some dude from an obscure band. He was like, somebody important in music world. So Rollins and I had him in common and a love for that band and stuff. And, you can't hang out with Rollins and not get philosophy, not get good wisdom. And, I don't agree with everything he says. He doesn't agree with everything I say, but he's good people. And so that's a treasured memory. Yeah. Just sort of on the comedic side, because, rock and roll. I once went into a hotel after a tour. The tour had wrapped, and I walked in, and there was this massive pyramid of TVs, and they were like not flat screens, they were TVs. And the techs for the tour had gone up into everybody's rooms, taken the TVs out, made a pyramid, wired them up to a single DVD player, and they were playing hardcore Swedish porn.
Brilliant.
So you walk in there, and it's just like, and that was hilarious.
That's great.
And while we were there, for some reason, I don't know why this is, but there are plenty of witnesses, so that's cool. The reception was completely not staffed. Maybe they just stopped being there after a certain period of time, but that's that's weird. But yeah, they did that, and there was no security. So the phone would ring at reception, and I'd go and answer it. I'd be like, blah 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 hotel. And they'd say, I want some cheese toasties, delivered up to my room. And I'd be like, room number, please, sir, and write it down. We're on it. Hang up. Great. And I remember Pedro from Killing Heidi really got into this. So he'd be like, what are we making? And we'd go into the kitchen and, cook up this stuff. And then I probably shouldn't have mentioned his name because it's a bit, it could be a little bit embarrassing. But we'd go up and knock on the doors, and he'd be all like, I'm Pedro from Killing Heidi. This is going to be awesome for that person on the other side of the door. And then the door would open, and they'd just take and go, cheers. And that's it, that's the end of it. So
that's great. So
that was funny. He could have been anywhere scoring groupies and writing hits, but instead he was making cheese toast.
That's hilarious.
I was doing a show once years ago, and Julian Casablancas from The Strokes came up and stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder. I never met him before, had nothing to do with him. And it was a Strokes tour, but I wasn't working for the Strokes. And he talked for 5 minutes, and I didn't understand a single word he said because he was speaking drug language. And I just kept saying, sure, being supportive. Yep. And then when we finished talking, he gave me this big hug, we're brothers now, and he walked off mumbling to himself, and I was just like, shit, hey, that guy is out of it. And then maybe an hour and a half later, he's on stage, killer show, speaking English like a normal human being, sensible human words. It was insane. It was just really crazy. So I don't know if he was he wasn't just taking the mickey. He can just recover super fast, I guess. So is that. Most people out there would be amazed at how many heterosexual band guys like to travel naked with each other in the Tarago or in the tour bus.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you were one of them.
Yeah, it's just one of those things we decided the first time we were on tour and driving across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Yeah. We should totally do this naked.
Got to do it.
So we did. Yep. I don't know why. I don't know what the significance was really.
Well, you make your own fun on tour.
You've got to, yeah.
So there was one band who used to turn the heat up to 35 degrees in the vehicle, and they'd be naked and sweaty. This is Australia in the summer. And they'd sweat for hours in the nude just so that they could pull into a bar or a pub and have that ice cold beer. And I said to them, do you want me to just stock the vehicle with ice cold beers? And they looked at me like I was the insane one. But these same guys, they tried to do that classic super glue the furniture to the ceiling trick in the hotel, and the roof collapsed.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so the manager came in and he was screaming like blue in the face. He was not a happy camper. And but they were made of money, this band. And so the manager just walked in, tore off a check, handed it to the hotel manager, like, shut up, bitch, just like dismissed, and walked out. And there was so many tens of thousands of dollars written on that check that the problem just immediately evaporated. So that was interesting. But they had this policy that every Tarago or every vehicle that they hired, when they returned it, it had to have at least one of the wheels broken off, because they were just burning money, it was just too many dollars, not enough cents. So I got to meet a lot of my musical heroes, and like we were talking about before, almost every one of them was just like amazing and human and just connecty and lovely, which I didn't expect going in. And it's normally like the new people and the less popular people that are the real not so nice people.
Yep.
I met my dear friend Annalise Brakenziek after the Logies one time when I was playing with Anastasia, and I'll always treasure that night because we don't get to have them anymore, So that was beautiful. But I honestly think the best in my story, could be wrong, but I feel like the best is yet to come, because I'm just getting started over here. And I keep saying I got caught with my pants down, but I kind of feel like I'm caught with my pants down, because what I'm doing is just what I'm doing. And when people connect with me and say it's meaningful to them, or they enjoy it, or it's, or even if it's just, good on you, it's like, what? I haven't done anything yet.
It's because you don't have an agenda behind you.
Well, I'm just thinking, you just wait. You just wait to see what's going on. But over the last couple of years, I've been really lucky. I've connected with some genuinely huge international artists just through Instagram. I don't even have a website. And they've connected with me and said, we want to represent your brand. We want to work with you. And they could work with anyone. So I don't know what's going on, but I'll take it. And so, I feel like I'm only at step one of what this thing could be, and I'm just really kind of cautiously optimistic. And then, of course, there's the YouTube thing. That could be a thing. That could be fun or not. Again, I don't have an agenda. I've got to say for the record, I don't care about subscribers or likes. I just hope I can help you if you want, or help you to chill out, or make friends with you. So there it is.
I love it. Okay, so believe it or not, we've been going for almost 3 hours.
You're kidding me.
Kid you not.
I'm so sorry, everybody.
No, this is great. I reckon we just wrap it up with the five normal questions I ask everyone.
Yes.
At the end. Because I'm pretty sure we've covered everything.
Oh, cool.
Covered most of what I wanted to anyway, I think.
Answered your questions.
Okay. What would you do differently, if anything, if you knew your rent and bills were covered?
I would do the same thing.
Yep.
Because, like I said, I don't care about money at all. I don't have any debts, which is amazing. And if I didn't run Temple, I'd never spend any sizable amounts of money. Like, I don't wear labels and things like that. I'm a dag. I've minimized and simplified my life a lot, so my life isn't expensive. And also, I haven't dated anyone in like 6 years, so every cent that I make is just for me.
Brilliant.
Ideally, I want to build a tiny house and go and live in it one day, but that's like way in the future. I think once Temple's shut down, because 99.9% of the things that I own are Temple infrastructure. And the things that I own just as human being Jay Vanderwerff, there's just the normal things. I have a toothbrush and stuff like that, but there's not a lot of stuff there. I already talked about my commitment to keep Temple small. I really want to stay boutique. So, as far as what I would do different, I feel like I've really landed on my feet. I feel like I've done what I set out to do. That's it, really. I feel like everything that's happened so far, and I'm going to be honest, there have been some brutal things that have happened, and unfortunately I'm not the only one that can say that. But everything that made me smile, or everything that hurt me, or put me in a hospital, or a psych ward or whatever, it gave me a thicker skin, a stronger heart, or a bigger pair of horns. And so I don't regret any of the things. And if I had a time machine, the only thing I'd go back and do is try and rescue my friends that didn't make it.
Yeah.
That's it. But as far as I'm concerned, mistakes exist for a reason. And as far as that relates to creativity and all of that kind of stuff, embrace it. Just be cool. You fuck up. Everybody fucks up. And I mean, here's an example. Like, Adam Savage from Mythbusters. He worked on the Star Wars movies. He's just like this incredible creative force. And one day I was watching him, and he messed something up, and he just couldn't get it. And he said, you never see him flap normally. You never see him break. And he was just like, you know what, guys, sorry. This is meant to be a one-day build. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to go home, have a bath, have a cup of tea. We'll regroup tomorrow. Sorry, I just need to reset. And he did that. And when he did it, I just went, that's incredible. That's what I do. And so to see that, just like Lady Gaga's got depression and Adam Savage fucks up and all this kind of stuff. Guys, if you're being creative, just do what you're doing and don't worry about what could I do different or what could I change. Just onward and upward. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's so beautiful.
And if you're suffering from writer's block or like a creative block, what would you do? What would be your go-to move?
Reset, just like Adam Savage.
Yep.
Take a nap, realize that I'm not terrible and useless.
Yep.
Everybody hits a wall. If you don't, I've never met you. That's it. You just got to reset. Don't make a big deal out of it. Give yourself a break, and that creativity and that good energy will come flowing back. Just have faith in it. And that's not like, I don't like that word faith, so you know what I mean.
I know.
But everything comes from within us. Good and bad, we create it. So that's why our lives can be radically bettered instantly if we just change our perspective. It's not hippie shit. It's just literally the way our brains, our neural pathways are wired. So your perspective determines your reality. And like everything else in life, the trick is to find the balance. But just give yourself a break and know that you're not the only one.
What's one thing you wish they'd taught you in school?
Ethics. So how to cooperate, not compete. And not just me, everyone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's it. That's my answer.
Yep. Beautiful. Any favourite books or podcasts?
Yes. Yours is the only podcast that I listen to because I'm on it. But I'm very much into books and always have been. My holy trinity are Huxley, Toffler and Orwell. So kind of dystopian future stuff that happens to be occurring. Mm-hmm. I love Douglas Copeland and Kinky Friedman for when I just want to kind of just relax and read a book. There are some things that I think should be required reading for everyone, and it kind of feeds into that sort of getting to know yourself and ethics angle. So like Plato, things like that should be required reading. Albert Camus shows us how to be happy and joyful in an ambivalent universe, and I think that's super important, especially for creatives when you're questioning who am I, what am I meant to be doing. There's this guy called Dan Doty from Canada. He's got some incredible writing and thoughts about contemporary loneliness, which again I think is very now. And I think everybody in the world should read Kierkegaard, because he's the guy that smashes the illusions of what the pillars of society are, and it's kind of like he's a necessary first step in defining our own individualities, of going onto the path, if you will. Books.
Great. I'll put a link to all those books and authors in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you those.
Yeah, awesome. If you could have a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what would you tell him?
So again, that feeds into mental health. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's okay to not be okay. I would say don't listen to the stigma that people try and put on you just because they don't understand or because they're in denial about their own situation. Like 1 in 5 Australians suffer from mental health in any year. That's huge.
Massive.
and it's a big problem. And so we shouldn't have this stigma. We've got to look at our social media attitudes towards social media, because it's being foisted on us. Oh, conspiracy theory, but yeah, it's being foisted on us to sell us products and to weaken our resolve to ideas that aren't naturally healthy for us for the benefit of others, and all the spontaneous moments are staged, and all the popular people are just there to sell you something, and I'm there to sell you something too, but the difference is I'm never going to hassle you or market to you. I'm just going to do what I do. If you like it, come along, you know? So like we could talk forever about mental health and all of that kind of stuff, but yeah, any strategy that I could impart to my younger self that would allow me to have coped better and not wasted so much time engaging in destructive behavior and connecting with toxic people and wastes of time, dead ends, that would be good. But the honest truth is I wouldn't have listened because I was 18.
Yeah. Truth.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end it. So thank you.
Thank you.
This has been awesome, and I think we should definitely do a round 2.
Oh, your poor listeners. I'm sorry, everyone.
No. Like, even if I'm the only one that listens to it, like I'll get something out of it for sure.
Yay.
But it's been awesome. So thanks, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the chat. Thanks for making these awesome guitars.
I can't help it.
They're absolutely fantastic to play.
Oh yeah, you're playing one.
Yeah, and honestly, man, it's like one of the nicest, if not the nicest guitar I've played. Like,
it's true.
And to think that you've just you put that together in 3 days. Like,
actually, I did, and then I took it to Adam Cole, and he did a couple of tweaks.
Yep.
And just sent it into the next level. So you got his his loving touch as well. Yeah. Awesome. No, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hey guys, Aaron again. Hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, I'd love it if you'd spread the word and share it with anyone you think might actually get something out of it. Also, don't forget to check out the blog at thewritersblock.co and follow us on the socials at thewritersblockau on Instagram, The Writers Block Co on Facebook, Writers Block AU on Twitter, and we even have a YouTube channel, which I'll throw this episode up on. It's audio only at the moment, but I'm sure down the track we'll probably start filming them too. Till then, you can subscribe to the channel via the link at the top of the blog homepage. Finally, I know it's a pain in the ass, but if you could leave a rating and review on iTunes, that would be amazing. It really does help, I'm told. I don't actually know. But if it does, and you can, that'd be awesome. Thanks guys, see you next time.